I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, June 6, 2017 to order with roll call, please.
Betts.
Here.
Kostler.
Here.
Cavelli.
Here.
Kraus.
Here.
McAlpine. Here. Weinhammer.
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now move to the public comment section where the public is invited to address the Committee of the Whole. I have nobody that is officially signed in. Is there anybody here that would like to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter of village business? Okay, we'll go ahead and close that. We'll go right into a discussion on the water and sewer rate study for a period of fiscal year 2019 through fiscal year 2023.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Michael.
The last water rate study that the Village of Cary did was done back in 2012. At the time that study was done, a 5-year rate schedule was adopted by the village board, and the last rate increase went into effect on May 1st, set to expire on April 30th. Knowing that, we went through our capital improvement program, making sure that all the water and sewer improvements were included in it. Last fiscal year, we budgeted to have a water rate study done. Tonight, I have with us Eric Granum from Trilogy Consulting, whose company performed the water rate study for us this year, as well as back in 2012. We'll take a little bit of time, let him present the study, and then we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Eric?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. As Michael said, I'm Eric Granum with Trilogy Consulting. My partner, Christine, was planning on coming here, but she was called to another meeting, so it's just me tonight. As Michael already said, the last rate study, just to start with a little history, was completed November 12th. At that time, the initial rates were just adjusted for May 2013, and then were the last 4 years there were annual increases of 3% to both to all the water and sewer rates, and the last one was just implemented in May 1st of this year. So in looking at this, the objectives for this current study, which would be for implementation for the next fiscal year, would be continue to generate adequate revenue to cover all your expenses and obligations, the main being operation and maintenance, depreciation on your assets, and then all the capital and debt obligations. And part of the capital is the capital improvement plan that was examined by our engineers. Along with that, we wanted to look at that comprehensive thing, especially focus on the capital funding, the 5-year plan of that, everything, and then look at the funding plan combined with future rate increases that would need to be implemented to accomplish that. And then finally, the one thing we want to do, this kind of is the completion of the last rate study, is to stabilize the reserve levels. Just a little history. In the last rate study, one of the recommendations was to complete all your capital improvement projects with reserves that were on hand. There was a surplus of reserves at that time, and the village has done that. And now at this time, we would like to stabilize those reserve levels kind of at the recommended level. So the few steps in the process that we go through when we do a study is to look at the revenue requirements, as well as the cash flow combined. Once we do that, then we do the cost of service, and that is just determining how the different rates should be funded so that the rates for the water rate versus the sewer rate versus the user fee reflects the actual cost of providing service. And then once we do that, it's rate design, and it's fairly simple rate design here in Cary. Just to go through, again, a little bit of history of where the last rate study had projected versus what has actually happened in that time. The revenues, since 2013, we had projected them to grow from 3.35 million to 3.68. Since there's been a fluctuation of between 3.43 million and 3.65. So it has been fairly close to what was projected originally. The O&M was projected to grow from 2.22 million to 2.37. And again, that has fluctuated. See a little bit more fluctuation in O&M, which would be expected between 2.05 and 2.55 million dollars since that time. The capital program, this is the entirety of capital expenditures. Originally, we were projecting the rates to accomplish the capital of $6.64 million over the 5-year period. In actuality, it's going to be about closer to $7.5 million. And as far as the reserve levels, we were projecting those to shrink again. They were at just over $9 million, and that's why we were recommending that those be used over time. We were originally projecting those to shrink to just under $5 million. They're actually, just right now, there's about $6 million. We're showing a projected 6.72 at the end of this current fiscal year, and that has more to do with what is going on with this year's capital projects and issuing some debt rather than paying for it through the reserves. And so looking at the whole cash flow picture, we need that to cover the ongoing operation and maintenance and any existing debt obligations as well as any future debt obligations from any additional debt that's incurred. We do want to look at the capital program, which includes funding all the necessary upgrades. There's a big phosphorus upgrade of the treatment plant. Will be being under construction this year, as well as the routine, more capital replacement renewal program. That's just ongoing things, maintenance of all the various infrastructure, main replacements, equipment replacements, new vehicles, and these are routine things that need to be funded. And then again, we want to stabilize the cash reserves to the recommended levels when we look at the cash flow analysis. Just kind of overall, and I'll get into a little bit more details. One thing as far as we've found is that the total billed usage that we had originally projected has declined a little bit more than anticipated. And so we've built in a further decline into our current 5-year projection going out to 2023. As I said, the reserve levels are adequate right now, but there are significant capital needs coming up in the next 5 years. So those would be completely depleted pretty shortly without a rate increase or issuing more debt to fund those capital projects. As far as debt coverage, the utility has sufficient currently. We don't see any problem with that. And there are 2 existing revenue bonds that will be coming off the books this year. So that gives the village some flexibility, capacity to issue new debt if is needed. And then one other thing, as far as the total assets, we're seeing that a lot of the existing plant infrastructure is depreciated, which doesn't necessarily mean it's no good completely. It's just there's a need to continually renew all that infrastructure, that equipment in the near future, and that's a significant piece of the capital improvement plan going forward. So as far as the recommendations overall, we'd be looking to implement an annual rate increase of about 5% beginning fiscal year 2019, so May of next year, 2018, and then 5 annual rate increases starting at that time. We're looking to stabilize that reserve level to about $4.6 million. And that number consists of several different items, an operating reserve for just, fluctuations month to month in your revenues versus your expenses. And a lot of these are required as part of having debt. There's a debt reserve that reflects your current debt payment, a bond reserve that reflects the kind of a maximum payment going forward, as well as a depreciation reserve that reflects a certain percentage of your assets. And then we also recommended an emergency capital reserve that would be available if any critical infrastructure were to be needed to be placed unanticipated. We are looking at with the capital, including this year, to issue debt to fund two of the main projects, that being the phosphorus upgrade coming up this year. And then in 2020, we're looking at replacing the well 10 treatment system that's due to be done. And that issuance would be about $5.1 million between the two of them. And then the remaining capital program is about $6.1 million. And that we'd be looking to cash finance that with annual user fees, as well as just some reserves that you still have available to do that. And just to show you kind of where we're at with the usage, because that goes into part of this. This chart goes back to fiscal year 2011, and there were about 76,000 gallons per customer per year was being used at that time. Right now, we're about 65,000 gallons. And so because of that trend, we're continuing that to be conservative in our projections, that to continue on for the next 5 years. And hopefully that will start to stabilize so we don't see drastic reductions in water usage and related revenues. Just to hit some of the highlights of the numbers in the cash flow projections, this is with the rate increase as recommended. We'll be looking at total revenues to grow from about 3.6 to about 4 million in the next 5 years. The cash expenses would fluctuate, of course, and that's due to which capital items are constructed in which year. But the main thing we're looking at is, for when we're at the end of this planning period, this net cash flow before capital, that is the amount of annual cash flow that is available for these capital items. And within here, we're not counting any debt incurrence, those 2018 and 2020. But at the end of the 2023, we're projecting to be about 800,000 available for more of these routine capital items that need to be done on an annual basis, because we really want to stay away from incurring debt for these types of things that are happening every year. Once you start having to do that, you fall farther behind, and your rates ultimately have to be higher because you're carrying excess interest costs and excess debt service when you're doing these things on an annual basis. And again, finally, the reserves, we are showing that there are some still negative actual cash flow, so there's still reserves available to be used in that capacity. But again, we want to stabilize that to around that $4.6 million, and that's the goal. How these translate into the actual rates. We use the same methodology that was used in the previous rate study. It's not overly complex. We just look at each line item in the different expense categories. We allocate those to either the water rate, the sewer rate, or a user fee. And the user fee is meant to recover a portion of the fixed costs that are relating to billing, meters, hydrants, things that aren't related to actual water usage. And it's a pretty small amount of the overall revenue picture. And so what we're recommending for this first adjustment for May of next year is for the water rate to actually come down slightly from $4.28 to $4.22 per 1,000 gallons. The sewer rate to increase from $3.51 to $3.95 per 1,000 gallons, and the user fee to increase slightly from $2.41 to $2.57 per month. And then after that, we would recommend four annual 5% increases to each of those rates across the board. And just to let you know, as far as the adjustment, the sewer increase reflects that big investment that's going on in the sewer plant this year. That's why the sewer rate would be increasing more than the water. And what we like to do is when we do a full cost of service like this, we want to make sure that those rates are covering what they're supposed to be doing, that the water rate covers the water cost and the sewer covers the sewer. So it's kind of an adjustment when we do the full study. And as far as where that puts you, should you implement those recommended rates in the surrounding area. I just have a chart here showing this is the average annual bill for an average customer. And this is based on, again, the 65,000 gallons of consumption annually. Right now, Cary's near the bottom. Only 2 other communities are lower right now, and then that would remain the case with this first increase that would be going in next year. Wouldn't want to project too much further out than that because I'm sure many of these other communities will be implementing their own rate increases for their own needs. But it would still remain very competitive in the area. So just kind of conclude all this before we get into any questions. Just want to emphasize that the utilities are in good condition right now. They're financially healthy. They have good reserve levels. They're in good shape. They're not over-reliant on debt. And what this is, what the rate increases are for is to maintain that position. We want to keep going. We want to, especially with the capital, there's a lot of investment that needs to be done in order to maintain the quality of service that the utilities provide, maintain the required upgrades that need to be done, and then be set up in a good position at the end of this planning period, this 5-year period, so that can continue to happen. We don't know exactly what the next 5 years will hold as far as capital improvements, but we want to put you in a good position to continue beyond that healthy position. So that's all I have for you, and I'm glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Eric.
A lot of information there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eric, I was looking at the numbers, and this may apply more to Eric Morimoto, but the expense for the water meters, is considerable. I noticed it's $200,000 per year recurring through 2021. And that all plays into this. And I guess I'm wondering, are we getting that big of a benefit out of the meter replacement to justify those expenses?
Certainly. We're currently about halfway through what we consider the village-wide meter replacement program. So this is for the residential water meters. So what those are doing, 2 things actually. Firstly, they're taking out of service meters that are obviously approaching the end of their useful life. We have a wide range of ages of homes in the community, but obviously the community was built up and had significant growth kind of in a concentrated period in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. So a lot of those meters are of the same generation, 20, 25 years old, 30, so they're all approaching that lifespan. Secondly, the new meters are also enabling us to do remote read. So currently in the old meters, we have to deploy essentially all of our water and sanitation staff, aside from maybe the chief operator. So you're talking 6, 7 guys that are deployed to do the meter readings. Non-upgraded meters, they have to go to the physical home and tap an interrogator or the reader up to the actual home. So on foot, they have to walk door to door. With the replacement meters that are in place, you might hear the term iPearl, those remote reads allow us to basically drive in a vehicle, and it basically can pull from several hundreds or thousands of feet away from the vehicle. They can do the whole, once it's complete, they should be able to read the whole village in a matter of 20 minutes, half hour, and then actually have time to go back and double check ones that didn't quite wake up from the sleep mode when the interrogators from the remote reads are triggering it. So in all the process, we can go from a week-long process down to a day. So from a staffing perspective, and then also from a reliability standpoint, the accuracy and the reliability of these new meters with very little moving parts, I believe does substantiate the effort that we've gone through over multiple years to replace them.
Isn't also, to Eric, to your point, Jim, too, is I think they're capturing more accurate readings now, whereas before we weren't getting accurate readings in some of the older meters, so we're actually going to be recouping some of the losses. Is that part of it too?
Yeah, it's probably a small percentage, but the accuracy is higher. We do bill in the per thousands of gallons, so I mean, these new meters are capable of accuracy to probably the gallon, I'd say. Assistant Director Walsh could probably explain it a little better if you want more detail, but to what we bill at, the current meters, they work, but these will obviously work better, especially for low usage properties. I think the older meters may even have a little more of an issue getting those accurate readings, but reliability, the technology, this is the current standard that we're looking at.
Okay, thanks. And then for the other, so basically what you're saying is a 5% increase for the next 4 years is the minimum we need to meet reserves, keep our reserve level adequate?
Yeah, for the next 5 years, starting next year. And it's a combination of things. It's the reserve levels. We're also planning to issue the debt. It's the other capital items. It's a bit of a balance between how much you want to keep in reserves versus how much you want to cash finance versus how much you want to issue debt. And we feel this is the best plan as far as, like with the debt, we're be taking advantage of the low interest Iepa loan. The current interest rate there is 1.75%, which is far below what you can get market rate. So it is that bit of a balance as far as, what's the priority, and we feel like this is the
So
appropriate
the 5% rate increase year over year, it also assumes 2 debt issuances. So I don't know if the village
Right.
board got that or not, but.
Right. Okay, I'm just looking at the total over the last, this is going to be 9 years, 37% increase? That's not even compounded, but, we do have other, we have expenses with the phosphorus, and I understand all that. There are things we need to address. But it's somebody else talk. I'm just thinking about it.
Can you speak up, please?
No, I said there are issues we have to address with the phosphorus removal mandated by the state, and I understand all the upgrades we have to do with the capital improvements. And I do think that financing the debt is the best way to go.
Right.
The 5% increase for 5 years is a lot. You're asking a lot.
And to your point about as far as the other debt reserve and why we would maintain that, obviously the 2 capital projects are factored into the rates, but it also does give us that balance and that backup for when unexpected things come up. Things not of a magnitude like the phosphorus project, where you have a regulatory requirement triggering a major project, but just the day-to-day things that we've seen, even just this year, we've had pumps that maybe we're hoping would last and or anticipate to last a certain amount of time, and operationally, just things happen in O&M. And we've had a couple of pumps that had to have been replaced at costs that obviously you have to account for. They're not $100 improvements. Sometimes they're thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. Those things do come up, and with the vintage of the majority of our particular water system, it is very just good practice to be prepared for those things and to have the cash reserves to handle those, which I appreciate your comments, Trustee Counselor, that it does make sense to, from our perspective as a recommendation, to finance those other 2 major projects so that we do have the liquid cash on hand to hit the unexpected stuff.
I only have one last sort of question or comment. You said in here, and there's been a lot of numbers, but the water usage rate has been decreasing for years, and there was I think a comment in here about it going to be 16% decrease further on. I guess I'm wondering how, people are buying more water efficient toilets and shower heads and things. Right. And have we already seen most of the decrease? I mean, are we really going to keep seeing that much of a decrease after we've had 10, 15 years of replacement of those types of things?
Right. And I guess it's a little hard to say. We did in the previous rate study, we did project a decrease for a few years and then a leveling off that actually continued to decrease below that level. We would, of course, expect it to get to a level where there will be no more decrease. I mean, people can only conserve so much, the new appliances. And You need a basic amount
The rain
just to live. But whether or not we've reached that point, it's hard to say. And we want to be conservative in our projections to make sure that if it does go below what we project, that you still have the revenues that you need.
I get the comment too, Trustee Coster, about the increase, and obviously we'd like to keep it to a minimum as well, but we're trying to look out beyond 5 years here too, and the last thing that we want to have happen is we do say twos across the board, and I'm not saying anyone's suggesting that, but then we get to 6 years out and we have to do a 15% or 20% rate increase to catch up, and so we're trying to be realistic and reasonable as far as the rate increases go here.
I think it's directly related to our population. I mean, there's, we have a decline in children in the neighborhoods, in the homes. I mean, it's just the way it is. And people aren't, we're in business to sell water. It's an enterprise, so we're not selling as much water as we used to sell.
People just aren't bathing as much. No, just kidding.
And we
We're
fight
watering
this.
their lawns and, that stuff, so.
And we do see a double-edged sword from especially from my department's perspective, because we have to advocate the sale of water to support the operation and maintenance of our infrastructure, but we're also, at the same token, advocating for water conservancy.
Right.
It's given the fact that the water that we do enjoy and benefit from is groundwater-based, and obviously it's a finite resource. So the conservation efforts have been spurred a lot with population, with the better technology, low volume flush toilets, shower heads. That's the first wave of technology. It continues to evolve, and we do anticipate that to continue, along with our own advocacy with things like rain barrels and not watering with potable water, but using gray water. I mean, there's things that we're pushing for and will continue to advocate for that will affect this. So these conservative numbers reflect that initiative on the village's part as well.
Does this assume, is there any way to, I know we have overcapacity in the sewage treatment plant, and it looks like it's getting worse as far as overcapacity. Is there ever a point where we could shutter part of the plant because the capacity is lowered and that decreases our expenses? So,
Actually, that's part of what we have in play right now with the phosphorus project. With some of that capacity, we're not expending extra thousands or millions of dollars for extra tankage. We're actually going to be utilizing existing tankage and sectioning it off to basically facilitate the conditions needed to make this biological phosphorus removal process work. So we are benefiting right now from that excess capacity, not having to build extra portions of that aeration basin.
okay.
So we still have capacity after that, but obviously we're continuing to utilize that model moving forward, and to the benefit of obviously the rates.
Any other comments?
I just have one. With these increases, is there anything that we have that's going to improve our quality of the water in Cary? It's hard. It's quite hard.
Well, it depends on where you live.
Okay.
But obviously the way the system works, we do have 3 deep wells and we have 6 what we call shallow wells. The deep wells come from a different aquifer, and we do actually have water softening built into that. Well, it enhances obviously quality from a hardness perspective, but specifically to remove barium. So that way it's eliminated from the finished product that's sent to distribution. The shallow wells do not have barium, so they were not, the decision at that point when they were constructed was not to introduce softening at that point. That's something that could be considered, but those are, especially at the scale of a well house, even for our 6 shallow wells, very significant cost. So it's something that could be explored, but I can get numbers for you, but it would be extremely probably cost prohibitive to maintain the rates even at what we're proposing if we were to introduce that scale of infrastructure improvement. The quality-wise, though, the shallow wells do have iron filtration, so that we do eliminate a lot of the issues that hard water would bring with regards to like doing laundry and having the kind of the orange tint to white clothing, things like that. We do our best with the current filtration systems and treatment systems to get rid of that element. So they do include those, and a lot of these treatment system improvements that are in the CIP, also built into the rate, are replacing and upgrading those treatment systems. Filtration membranes, things like that have a finite shelf life, and those are significant costs, obviously relative to the well operation. And those things we are looking at maintaining and improving where we can. But softening itself as far as hardness, unless there's a significant cash infusion to make those improvements, we're probably likely to continue with the blend that we have from the deep wells and the shallow wells.
Okay, so no, right?
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Sorry, long answer to a short question. I apologize.
Scientific answer.
Yeah.
So.
Any other discussion? Thank you, Erics. He spells it wrong?
No, it's right.
Oh, that's right.
Mayor, can I make one other comment?
Yes, you can.
There are, as was stated, there are 2 IEPA loans that we will be looking for. One for the phosphorus program, one a little further out related to one of the well projects. Related to the phosphorus project and that IEPA loan, at the next board meeting or shortly around there, we're going to be bringing to you a borrowing ordinance that we will need to execute to continue to allow us to move forward with the IEPA loan. Great benefit to the residents of the Village of Cary that we can take advantage of a rate of 1.75% for 20 years, which is well below market rates if we went out to issue water and sewer revenue bonds for that length of time. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that.
Eric, how much was the phosphorus improvement? Was it like 2.5 million?
It's about 3.1 million or so. It'll be spread out over 2 different fiscal years. So the first fiscal year be about that too.
Right, okay.
And this ordinance that Mr. Ducharme mentioned will allow us to stay on that schedule with the IPA process as well as our compliance schedule for the phosphorus removal. So appreciate it.
Do we, for the next meeting, does the village board need Eric Granum here for any questions? Okay.
You guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll enter into a discussion on community grant program applications. Jake?
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Last year was the first year that we had issued community grant program grants to our local nonprofits here. I think the program was pretty successful. This year, the village board had funded $15,000 for community event grants. We received 4 applications here. We had an application from the Chamber, the Cary Soccer Association, the Rotary Club, and the Cary 26 Education Foundation. Before you in the packet are recommendations as far as grant awards go. $8,000 for the Chamber, $2,000, I should step back, $8,000 for the Chamber's Main Street Fest, $2,000 for the Cary Soccer Association in their memorial tournament, $4,000 for the Rotary Club and the Farmers Market, and then Cary 26 Education Foundation, it would be $1,000 for their Cary 5K Shuffle. And so want to get any feedback that the village board has regarding these, and then assuming that you're comfortable with the recommendations, at the next village board meeting, we would approve the grant awards. So are there any questions that you have for me?
Do we have in here with that money, like the, sorry, computer's not working.
Do you want the
like
applications?
Like the $4,000, what it's going to be spent for, what they're doing with it, the 2,000, the 1,000, the 8,000?
We do have representatives from the various groups that are here in the audience tonight.
Do you want to talk to
Well,
someone?
I'm just curious, because I know the Main Street Fest was profitable last year, correct?
Correct.
So I'm just curious what the money's going, what the money's being used for.
For the,
Any
you
of
have
them?
questions on the Main Street Fest? Do we have
Any
chamber?
of them, I'm just curious what, I'm just using that as an example, but I'm just curious what the money's going to be used for.
We have Lynn Cacabello here. Did you want to discuss, come up to the mic and discuss what the funding is for?
It is,
Your
everybody
name and
got the,
address.
what?
Your name.
Lynn Cacabello from the Cary Grove Chamber of Commerce. Sorry, first time at the mic. I believe you'll find it on, I'm not sure how the packet came over to you, but on page 1 and 2, that's titled Village of Cary 2017 Community Event Grant Program. It goes into the outline of where the money is going to be used. that was part of the application process where we get into, and I don't have my phone, hang on just. So overall on this Cary Main Street Fest, let me just say that it is an enormous endeavor that the Chamber has taken on over the last 3 years. The popularity of it has grown. Last year, we did see huge success that we hadn't seen in the previous years. We went from 4,000 people to over 8,000 people. So when you look at our overall package that we turned into the Village of Cary, you can see all of our numbers, everything for the budget is in there. The thing that we need to be mindful of, these numbers are reflective of a beautiful 75-degree weekend, 2 days of beautiful weather. If it rained all day, both days, we'd be telling a completely different story. The Chamber is a business, non-for-profit business organization. We're made up of members of businesses. We don't have the funding to stand alone on this. If we get rained out and nobody walks through our gates, we won't sell any tickets, food sales, and we'll still have all of the overhead that needs to be paid out. So there's tremendous amount of risk on the Chamber's behalf. We put in here the items that we were looking for are tangible items that we can track, such as our marketing pieces. We do thousands and thousands and thousands of marketing pieces, from posters to postcards to mailings to signage. All of those are paid up upfront, whether anybody comes through the door of the fest or not. And then also our entertainment, and all the entertainment for this year has already been booked after all of with some of the proceeds from last year, we were able to secure some of the bands for this year. So those are fees that happen. Whether or not the fest is successful or not, we will be paying the event company. The bands get paid, all the marketing pieces get paid. So that is all broken out into that packet that hopefully was sent over to you, right? On there. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there's more.
Was the Main Street Fest profitable last year?
It was, and I say that, you know, as a preference, it was 75 degrees both days. And if it had rained both days and had been, you know, 20 degrees, 30 degrees like it was, you know, the weekend after, nobody would, you know, who's going to come down, and everybody still gets paid. So we made that was also in that packet. Everything from last year was in there. We don't quote me on it here, but I want.
Computer's not working. I'm sorry, my computer's not working.
Oh, that's okay.
Can you just tell me how much you made last year?
15,000?
15,175.
Yeah. Oop, I'm glad I was close. That's what I thought it was. Again, you know, we are looking at what we are hoping to do going forward is have a rainy day fund, if you will, for ourselves, so we can continue doing this and continue as a chamber supporting this. You know, it's kind of an event that most people would consider, you know, they look at it as a village event before they look at it as a chamber event. You know, we try to work hard to connect the chamber's name to it, but a lot of, you know, community people think it's run by the Village of Cary. So we're looking, the board would like to look into having a rainy day fund, so when the weather is bad, and it will happen one of these years, that we're not, you know, all of our reserves aren't blown out of the water. We're looking at also, it's, you know, we don't want our 1 year of success to, you know, start making all of the plans for all the money that we're going to use in the future. So we're just kind of taking it year by year as a board. We looked at it in November and with all the finances and said, do we want to do this again this year or not? This is where we're at. Shall we take some of this money, roll it into next year? And that's what we did. We rolled it into this year, and we're able to secure, put a down payment on with the event company, and then also use it for the entertainment. We'd like to look at increasing our grant program that we get back, and part of our gate we've had this year. Again, we have a Cary Booster Club as part of the grant program. The Trojan Track and Cross Country Team is part of the grant program. And then Cary District 26 Education Foundation approached me shortly after the fest last year, and because of the success of the fest, they wanted to connect their event with our event. And after many meetings with Kurt Kaiser and our event company, we came to an agreement that would work for all of us, so they can maintain their own identity with District 26. So they will be running the Cary 5K Main Street Shuffle or something. I forget what they've bounced around a couple of names, but they are taking advantage of our marketing pieces, and they will be on our marketing pieces, and they will be taking advantage of some of our equipment that will already be down there, like the tents, and their people in the race will come into the fest. Part of their race fees will include a wristband, and they'll be coming in to pick up their packets. And so we're hoping that that will be a nice bump in attendance for us on Sundays, and it will be a win-win for them to be connected with Cary Main Street Fest and the reputation that it's growing. I will say, on the reputation side, when we started this whole thing several years ago, the event company told us it would take 5 years for it to grow into its own known event throughout the Chicagoland, and I can say that we are pretty close to being there. I get calls all the time, emails all the time from bands, from people, and it's definitely something that's become people's destination in September. So we definitely have a great thing going, and we are just hoping to continue with it in the years to come. And so it's something like Lakeside Fest or our festival days, and Cary will have its own. So hopefully that answers some of your question.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
questions. The other thing I had was, last year I know we talked about the police services and public works services and what that provides and the monetary amount that we spend on that too. Do you recall how much roughly that was?
For this event specifically? Michael, Mary, do you?
I think it was mentioned last year around $6,000 to $7,000 in kind services.
How much?
6,000 to 7,000.
Okay.
We can certainly gather that information for when you consider it at the village board level.
Yeah, and because my other question then rolls into, I mean, do we do that for any other entity? Like, for instance, let's say the high school, I don't know if they hire extra officers for, let's say, football games or anything else. I mean, do we provide those services for free, or do we generally charge them for the officer?
Yeah, there are services that are provided to other events. I mean, a good example, one here is, the Cary Shuffle 5K that is also asking for a grant. I mean, there are going to be some in-kind services that are provided for that. I think this is, too, it's a broader discussion that the village board will have to have here. There's many events that we have that go on in town, parades, these types of special events that, we have a lot of in-kind services that, they cost us money. And I think that we need to sit down and, have a discussion about potentially putting together a policy for that, and if we charge back. Because I think if we charge back to one, we should do it and treat everyone equally on it.
Well, the other reason why I asked that, I know, we keep talking about the deficit we're facing next year, a sizable deficit we're facing as a village next year. So that's why I'm asking all these questions, just so I have all the information.
Yeah, and directly to hit on that, I don't know if this grant program is going to be something that's going to be in the budget next year. We'll discuss it through the budget process, but we were at $30,000, and now we're at $15,000 this year. I can't predict the future, but we're going to have some tough decisions to make, and I think things like this, they may be cut.
Lynn, I've been supportive of this. But one thing I do have to bring up, seeing how profitable it was last year, the board went from 2 years ago, for those that were on the board at the time, we donated $25,000 to this, and then last year we winnowed it down to $10,000 on the basis that this was the last contribution we were going to make, so it could be self-sustaining. And, now we're going down the path again of $8,000, which, okay, we are giving a lot of in-kind services, and that was something that, in my understanding, killed Carry Days, which was the biggest festival we had here, was the village charging back services, and that ended up killing that festival. So I don't ever want to see that happen. I would always be supportive of the in-kind services being provided for this fest. I think one thing you kept stating was about the weather, and I guess one question I have for you is whether you have tried to buy any type of insurance to protect you against a bad weather event, because I know that there are options like that where you can purchase a policy that'll protect you in case you have rain all weekend.
Well, last year, my first day was June 21st as the executive director, so all of this was already in motion. And I know the previous executive director checked into that, and the cost is cost prohibitive to the fest itself to get the insurance. So that's, kind of, again, maybe down the road, if we continue to see success, that's something that we can look into. But right now, we don't have the chamber is a nonprofit. It doesn't have the reserves to even come close to covering the purchase of the insurance for it at this point.
I think for our first year's contribution was $20,000, and that came from our general fund. Last year's money came from proceeds from video gaming, so it really wasn't a direct hit to our taxpayers. And we channeled some of that. I think we made $65,000 last year in video gaming. So out of that $65,000, we're taking $15,000 for this grant. So it's not really taxed. It is, but it comes down.
It was still a part of the village's general fund.
Yeah, but this has gone down sizably. And it's no secret. I'm a huge supporter of it. It brings a ton of people into the village. Our downtown businesses thrive on it. The rest of the village businesses thrive on this. We've got a lot of our key businesses supporting this, and I think it's a great event to help showcase the village of Cary.
Lynn, can you explain, I know that the approach is to really get a lot of local vendors, even more so, and you're changing it up a little bit with some of the different venues for people that are going to have market items, for example, available, that we're trying to get local people to buy tables and things like that. So, I think that's important to maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yes. Well, the whole event itself is all, I am all about community. The chamber is about community. Part of our mission statement is to improve the quality of life in and around our community. We do everything we can do to, our board of directors is 100% behind this. They are already sending emails and reaching out to every chamber member to procure sponsorships, making the calls directly themselves as I work on it internally within my office. We are trying to grow in last year, for those of you that were there, the family area, which was spearheaded by Lisa Raup, who's here this evening, grew and was extremely successful. We are expanding that area this year, and we are reaching out to local crafters. We've got lowered our price on a booth for nonprofit and homemade items to try and get more of that market area to grow. We've reached out to every single one of our members that's a food vendor. They all have the applications in their hand if they are interested in doing so. We have got on board, at the Sage was on board before the end of 16, and we've got about probably 9, 10 major corporations in town that have already committed to being part of it, and some that are not even part of our town, neighboring corporations that want to be supportive of it. So we're doing everything we can to make it possible with local entertainment. We've reached out to local bands. We're going to be hosting a talent show this year for the local young talent for kids ages, well, we said anywhere from 3. If your 3-year-old is amazingly gifted, they can get up on stage, up to 15, and just try and highlight what's best about Cary. You know, I think it's a testament to for the volunteers. Last year, we had over 300 volunteers. I sent out a survey after it was over last year and did not get one negative response back from any of our volunteers. When I asked a couple months ago for the sign up, I already have 8 shifts completely full, all for the beer tent, but everybody likes the beer tent. I only have one of those shifts left open. So it's definitely something I think that the community, I feel, is very, you know, anywhere where I am at, that it's talked about, people are very excited and want to be part of it. And, you know, from a personal standpoint, from the director of the chamber, I want it to be something that we're able to continue and supported by both, you know, the village and the chamber as well, because I think it's a great asset to our community and our town that we live in. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Any other comments for the chamber? We can ask Cary Soccer and the Rotary Club too as well. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anybody here from the Soccer Association? No. How about the Rotary?
Yeah, we're running the farmer's market. Took over from the chamber. You got any questions about what we're doing with the money or anything, or any questions? We appreciate all your support.
Same thing, you guys are profitable, I imagine, out there?
Yeah, we're putting any profits we get out of it into improvement for the village of Cary. We'd like to see about maybe putting like a rotary clock by the train station or something. And we're putting our money into a fund for beautification project for Cary and Foxford Grove, because we're the Cary Grove Rotary.
Thanks, Dave.
How about Cary Education Foundation? Okay. All right. Any other feedback on this? Is everybody okay with these amounts, or do you have other suggested
I just
amounts?
have a question on it. Again, and I asked this last year, how do we come about determining how we're divvying up the funds? And the reason I ask this, it's no disrespect to the Rotary, but they asked for 4,000, we're giving 4,000. Is there any process that we're going through? Because I'm looking at most of the other ones and we're giving them roughly half of what they asked for. So I'm just curious what process we're following in case someone had a question about how we're coming up with how we're divvying up the money.
I would say it's my qualitative analysis
Okay,
here.
okay. I just want to make sure there's a method to the madness, so to speak.
There always is here.
Good.
My only request would be that we vote on them separately instead of all together. I would just say that I think the Cary Soccer Association, that would be more under the Park District's umbrella, that I think they ought to go to the Park District and ask them for some help as opposed to the village. But the other ones I really like and support.
All right, thank you. Trustee Cavell, you had asked me about switching some things around on the
Yeah, I was just asking if we can do the orientation
last. Yeah,
That's okay.
would the village board mind if, or the committee of the whole mind if we were to make the village board orientation last?
Perfect.
That's fine.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so we'll move that to the last item. So discussion on electronic billing.
I'm coming. I know I have it here somewhere. Electronic billing. Trustee Weinhammer, I think you had question in terms of if we had the ability here at the Village of Cary to email someone their water bill. As everyone knows, we currently outsource the printing and the mailing of our water bills. Internally, through our existing software, we do not have the ability ourselves to email those bills out. So we reached out to the company who currently does the printing and mailing of our water bills. They do have a program. There's information in there related to communities that are currently using that program. The program that would be available to us through our outsourcer, Third Millennium, would not actually email someone a copy of their water bill, but residents would be able to register. They would receive a notification that their water bill was ready to view, and they could go out to a website and look at their water bill. Currently now, that would be the nicest part of the program, because currently people can pay for their water bill on the village's website, but they can't go to our website, pull up the water bill, see their water bill, and then go ahead and pay it. People would like the luxury or the ability to be able to see their water bill before they pay it. The only downside to this program that's offered through Third Millennium are the upfront costs. And the upfront costs, as stated here, are fairly substantial, but they're probably even a little more substantial when you take into account the number of residents who, based on estimates we're seeing from other communities, the numbers of people who would actually utilize the service may be 10% or less than our customers. So if we're doing it for the convenience of X amount of residents, I'm not saying that's not a valid point, the cost to produce those bills for those number of customers is a little more substantial. We did reach out to a community. I personally reached out to Lincolnshire. Lincolnshire has the ability through their software system to be able to not only email a copy of their bill to a portion of their residents or whoever is interested, but their software also creates then another separate file that sends it to an outsourcer, and they go ahead and print and mail those water bills for them. People, I think, do utilize an outsourcer just because of generally the break they can get on the first class postage, and due to the volumes of those outsourcers, the cost to produce the forms and envelopes is far less than we could pay for them on our own. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, seek out more information. I think to give you one last point, when I reached out to the finance director for the Village of Lincolnshire, they used to run our old software, which was MSI or MSI Harris software. They currently went with company BS&A. There was a group of 12 communities in Lake County who were looking for new software systems. Collectively, they went together as a group, purchased a software system. That's what they're running now. He told me also that based on the system they have, they were planning on being the first community in Illinois to utilize an iCloud program, which would allow people to pay their water bill from a text. I do have a feeling, because I know when we talked to our own outsourcer, they were hoping that they could create an email program to break it away from having a credit card processor at the same time. The credit card processing part of it is the expensive part of it, but it is a nice convenience for people. Maybe down the road in the future, they would be able to offer us just a separate email component, and if that was possible, the cost would probably be less and we'd probably be able to utilize it.
Any other comments on this?
So are you recommending we do not use this system?
Please, when I looked at the cost, I thought it was a pretty substantial cost. I mean, the one-time costs were $5,200, and then on an ongoing basis, we'd be looking at a little over $2,000 a year. each year going forward after that. I figured it would take pretty much probably a good part of a year to get people familiar with the program. And then when I took into account how many people may actually be utilizing, I thought that might be a big expense that it would be up to the board if we wanted to absorb that or not.
This is certainly an option for the village board to consider right now. I do think here, though, for the future, and you heard Mike, talk about, our financial system, it's outdated. And I think if, once we go to a new financial system here, that would help us be a little bit more nimble and do a little bit differently of what we do right now as far as water billing goes. So it's an option for the board to consider now, and, we're just looking for your feedback on it.
Sounds like a good MPI opportunity.
I mean, I moved here 4 years ago, and ever since I moved here, I have always called and asked the village and said, do you guys have the option for me to receive the bill electronically versus in the mail? And they said, no, we do get a lot of calls about it. Go ahead and follow up. I've been following up every year, no. I don't know how many calls they receive on it, but they do receive other calls on it as well. It would be a convenience for anybody who's traveling, who doesn't open their mail regularly and their email's in front of them. They can just go pay their bill. No postage, for you guys to send out stuff.
Probably, I think the one thing that's surprising myself, and I'll tell you just from my experience with water bills, probably the biggest service that people take advantage of would be our direct debit service that's here, which is running about the average that you'd see in a normal community, probably between 10 and 15% of our total 6,200 bills. The part that surprises me most in the village of Cary here are the number of people who come in through the front door and pay their water bill. Far greater numbers than my experience would be in other communities. And I can tell that because of the amount of payments that flow through the lockbox, way down in comparison to what you'd see in other communities, which just tells us people aren't mailing their water bills in. Direct debit is popular, but I think it's just whoever is used to signing up for a direct debit program or an auto payment program takes advantage. We do get calls about email, and there will be more and more calls going forward. We just know we didn't have the ability inside or internally to do it. I think we have in the 5-year CIP the fact that we're looking to switch out our financial software. And when that time comes, you can be sure that that is a service that we will make sure is built into the program.
Do we have direct deposit?
Well, direct debit,
Debit.
where basically when you receive your water bill, you sign up for the program, and basically it's paid directly out of your bank account on the due date 6 times a year when your water bill is due.
It's easy. That's what I do.
It's very easy. People take advantage of it. Very few problems. Initially, I think people are always a little skeptical about the fact that they're allowing us to debit their bank account for that payment. But very few problems, no issues, no complaints that I'm aware of.
I think that this is something in the future. That we have to consider that as things go more automated, we're definitely going to want that. But I think, as you had mentioned, it should be in conjunction with us doing our new accounting system versus if we paid all this money for a one-time setup cost and to monitor it and then convert and have to really we could be duplicating costs and not getting the return on doing that if we're going to upgrade in the next 5 years. But I do agree with Trustee Weinhammer that it is something that people do want to have that ease. You're seeing things nowadays like who can do this right away? Boom, I can pay it right off of here. I see these phones that go like this and they split the bills, and I'm not quite there, but I'm getting there. So, but I just think for right now, for what we have, I think it's good that we look at it and we address it, but that it should be done in conjunction with upgrading our systems.
Please, as you see other things, we're more than happy to look into them if it's something
Absolutely.
that you're concerned with or have questions about. It doesn't take that long to do. And it clearly is your choice if you would like us to pursue it or not.
All right, thank you, Michael. Moving ahead to Westlake subdivision.
Is this something that we're not wanting to pursue at this time?
I'd rather, like Michael had suggested with the upgrading our financial, that's the best time to do that.
I agree.
I got a lot of people were nodding their heads during that. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Mayor. Just a reminder for the board, the last board meeting we had, staff provided a verbal update during the department head updates regarding the Westlake subdivision. Since the developer has approached the various taxing districts, school districts and the park district, and also the village, seeking potential reductions in the impact fees that are associated with the Westlake subdivision. They're still looking to move forward with their petition at this point. I have received a draft petition, which I'm reviewing just for completeness before they formally submit, but they do plan to pursue the development. However, in order to make the project work, they still believe that financially they would need to have some level of concessions or reductions in the fees that are associated. The board, during a previous meeting, suggested having the item on the agenda for discussion. Again, this table just summarizes what the previous development was required to provide under their annexation agreement and the village code for the townhome plan that was originally approved. The proposed subdivision would reduce the number of units that would be constructed on the site from basically 118 residential units down to 59. But due to our fee structure for impact fees for single-family homes based on the number of bedrooms that would be proposed, the fees would be significantly more than what the townhome project would require. The table displayed here, the center column is basically what they propose to the various districts for fees, which would be, from the school district standpoint, would keep the districts whole as far as what the townhome project was approved for versus the single-family home. There would be a fee reduction to the park district, but they would pay them in multiple or 3 installments versus 59 installments when permits are issued. And then for the village, they're asking for a reduction for the impact fee that was in the annexation agreement, which is significantly less than what was originally approved in the early 2000s for the project. So this evening, staff, again, is just asking for direction from the board as the other districts have given the developers some negative feedback or not negotiated the prices further. Direction from the board if you'd like staff to have a more active role in negotiations or discussions with the districts to see if we can work with the developer and the districts to find some middle ground to reach a consensus on appropriate fees for the development.
So we've taken a more passive approach here on this. And does the village board want us to just continue with the approach and let this go through the zoning process and we can discuss fees at a later time, or do you want us to be a little bit more aggressive and try to get the school district and the park district together and talk fees here on this?
Have they already talked?
I've reached out to the park district and had a conversation with the school district, and right now what the school district had indicated is that this is something that they can control, and there's a lot of chatter in the state about potentially taking away some of their funding, and they're kind of set on their position. The park district, they're not too interested in negotiating at this time, and we've accepted those answers, again, more as a passive approach here. And we can watch this development go through the zoning process here, that's fine, and we can get into the financials later. That's an option for the board to consider here, and we're just looking for your feedback if you want us to try to get the school district and the park district together with the village, have a meeting with everyone to sit down and talk about this, or just let it go through the zoning process.
I mean, I would think that would be ideal to have all the people that this affects on the same page.
I'm not in favor of changing the fees. I'm not in favor of the project, so.
Yeah, I'm just confused as why the school district is pushing back if they're being made whole. But you don't have to answer that. That's just a statement. In the park district, I guess I can understand there. Village is where we're taking it, and I think that's where we need to focus on things. And it doesn't have to be tonight, but obviously our fees are a lot lower
Considerably
than they would have
less.
been. So,
And
We
I'll-
can control our fees.
Yeah, and from a standpoint of looking at the fees that are proposed here, the village, for all the fees, has the ability to establish the fees. So there is an annexation agreement that covers this property that has established a separate fee for the village, but can also establish what the fees are for the other taxing districts as well. From a revenue standpoint, looking at this chart, yes, it is a significant decrease from what it was when the project was originally approved in 2003. But this doesn't show all of the revenue or impact fees that the village would collect as part of the project. There would be other water sewer tap-on fees that we would collect, building permit fees, things on the like from that standpoint that would also generate revenue to the village on a one-time basis. And then going forward, obviously the project would produce additional revenue for the village through property taxes, increase in local sales tax from residents or new residents in the community that are shopping locally, things along those lines, water sewer rates, increased revenue we would get from that standpoint as well. So I agree with Trustee Coster, looking at the table, it is a significant decrease looking at the one-time fee. And I think there may be still some discussion from that standpoint of what the final fee might be, but that's the initial blush proposal that was proposed at this point.
I just have a couple comments. I probably, and I agree, I did call and ask about this because we're looking at a 75% decrease in what we should be getting to what they're offering us. So, but I also, my understanding is this is simply an annexation fee and that at some point this expires. If this development doesn't get done, when does that agreement expire that we would receive nothing?
I believe there's a little over 5 years left in the agreement.
Okay.
So it's a 20-year agreement for the property.
So, and I guess my train of thought on it is that I believe we'd have better negotiating once they've gone through the process of the zoning, because then, in my opinion, they're more committed to moving forward with it. And I'd like to see what they propose to us if they come back with a different number than this and then work from a negotiation standpoint. I just don't want to see us, I don't see the point in us getting involved with the school district and the park district at this point till they go through the ZPA and see what they come in from there. That's just my thought on it from a negotiating. I think we have a stronger negotiating standpoint once they're committed to the project. But I'm not happy with that number. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that I would agree to that number.
I think you bring up a good point. I was looking at it from the standpoint of I hate to waste everyone's time if we can't come to some agreement.
Right.
So.
And I think that would be the ultimate, would be at some point to do that once we know that they've gone through the process. Because I think in life, you're just a little bit more committed as a business if you've gone to those next stages than if we come here and then they just say, oh, forget the whole thing. Because right now, if they're saying they're not willing to negotiate, just like Trustee Kostler said, part of it doesn't make sense if the school district is whole. What difference, does it make? But again, once they get to that next step, I think that's the time that the role would be for everyone to come together and see where we're at with that. And where are we with regards to, we sent stuff was sent out to to the neighborhood, correct? Wasn't there something sent out to everyone that's living there now?
No, from a developer standpoint, the developers, through their due diligence period,
Right.
since we met with them in September, they've met with the association there and has had discussions with the homeowners association. So to date, they've done, the developer has done a significant amount of costs in developing plans and, doing their due diligence to continue their contract on the property. So they've sunk some dollars into the project already. From a notice from the village's standpoint, they have not formally submitted the petition yet. So when they are scheduled for a zoning hearing, the notice will go out to the property owners that are within 250 feet of that subdivision. So the entire subdivision and any properties that are within that notice ring would receive a mailing of when the public hearing would take place.
Have they given you any feedback from their meetings with the association? Do we have any feedback at this point about the meetings that they have held?
Yeah, from discussions with the developer, the association has been favorable towards the
Okay.
project. Obviously, the residents that are back there have lived in the subdivision, most of them since the initial construction of it. From their perspective, they like to see the project completed. And their concerns were as far as how the association would be able to maintain their common areas as by breaking off portions of the site that were originally approved for the townhouse project. So they're working on through their negotiations, modifications of the homeowners association documents, create another layer in there that would allow the proposed homes to also help with maintenance of those common areas like the detention basin and other entry features as you drive into the subdivision, so that the developers are working diligently to make sure that they are addressing the concerns of the residents. So feedback that I've received has been positive thus far. I'm more curious of when the project is moving forward.
Under current code, the school district would get $490,000, and then the village would get $354,000. I'm trying to think they're trying to come in under a townhome plan, but build single-family homes. So to say the school district is being made whole, they're only being made whole under what the townhome plan was, but not under what normally would be for a single-family development.
Yeah, correct. If you're looking specifically at the mixture of the number of bedrooms in a townhome project versus number of the single-family code is looking at every house being a 4-bedroom house.
That's what I'm looking at too, is that's the reason why the school district is saying, wait a minute.
Right, and to that perspective, yes. I mean, our code specifically, does charge a larger rate for single-family homes. That's I think the nature of, the impact fees we're looking at. Those are, the primary ones that are producing, students or, for the school. The mixture of what this project would produce from a mathematical calculation for a townhome plan versus a single-family home plan, the number of students created would be generally the same for the two, the mixture they would have at this point. There would be slightly more students produced, but yeah, just, blankly looking at the code, it is a significant decrease from what would be presented.
Are they saying then that it's not financially feasible to do this under the townhome plan or under the single-family code plan?
Under the single-family code plan. So it's
if
more.
we got things for a normal single-family home, they're saying it's not feasible for them to do this development?
Correct. From a financial standpoint, the break-even point for them to, under the current market conditions, yes, the real estate market is coming back, but you do not see a lot of new construction. They did have some experiences in the village of Cary where they developed the enclave and finished off the lots that were in there. So they have experience in the market and have seen, some positives from that standpoint. But, this project is unique from a standpoint that they don't have, the utility costs they have to put in there, significant costs because the roads and existing utilities are in there. They do have some work they have to do to reconfigure from a townhome plan to a single-family home plan. But, where our fees are established, kind of pre-recession levels, the market for what their product is looking at here, the density that they'd be able to get, their return, they're basically saying they can't make a return on the investment at the current levels.
I'm not sure why the village would want to then come in under this townhome plan for the single family proposed. That basically then we're saying for any other development that comes in, they're going to come in and say, well, we want the same.
Yeah, you're looking at, the one way to look at it is this subdivision is unique from a standpoint that it's a stalled project, that there hasn't been any activity on the site since 2006. So, we have a specific agreement in place on this property now that for the annexation of it, you can, through that annexation agreement, negotiate rates that are specific towards this subdivision, and then any new subdivision that comes in would still be subject to our existing rates, so that it wouldn't be, a variance or carte blanche to, reduce our code. It would be speaking specifically to this subdivision, from that standpoint. So if, out by, Lions Ridge, if vacant properties over there annexed into the village and wanted to develop, they could be subject to the existing fees in the code.
But this is simply, what we're talking about here is simply an annexation fee. So if somebody said they wanted to build a home over in Cimarron, and it doesn't need to be any annexation, there's not going to be this fee
For the village fee.
for the
correct.
village fee. So I'm just talking about, forget anything else, I'm just talking the village portion of it.
And what I'm, I guess I might not have been clear enough, is for the property in general, there's the annexation agreement that can also specify other fees to districts as well. So in that annexation agreement, it could be modified to dictate what the fee would be charged for the school district and the park district and the village as well.
So we have that authority?
Correct.
The village controls that.
So do we have the authority to modify the existing annexation agreement?
Yes.
So we could come in and say, and I'm just saying hypothetically, we could come in and say, hey, park district, here's what you're going to get for this, and hey, school district, here's what you're going to get for this.
That's correct.
All the more reason, in my opinion, than to wait for it to go through the ZPA before we get involved, and then get everybody together and try and come up with if it's a viable development to see what we can agree upon.
Yeah, and we're not saying that we disagree with that. I just wanted to know what the village board's position is on this, and if he wanted us to be a little bit more aggressive than what we have been to date.
I don't want you to be more aggressive.
Me either.
I agree with Trustee Kraus. I don't like it, and I would rather you just sit on it and let them take action.
Otherwise, we're negotiating with ourselves.
Right. That's what I feel.
Is everybody in agreement? Let it ride, go through the ZPA?
Sure. Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Country Commons utility connection?
I'll take this one as well. Request before you is really for discussion. We have a homeowner that's in the village of Trout Valley who's doing significant improvements to the subject property. He is actually present here this evening, so he'll be able to answer any questions you may have directly of him related to the project. Is seeking for part of the redevelopment efforts to connect to the village's sanitary sewer. Country Commons Road, which you can see in the slide, basically divides the village of Cary from the village of Trout Valley. The dash line here goes right down the middle of the roadway. Anything north of that or the top of the slide is actually within the village of Cary. So the police station is on the top of the slide in this location here. The homes, which are directly behind Village Hall, they're in the village of Cary Incorporated, but they're part of the Trout Valley subdivision or association. So they pay private roads, they'll pay dues for the maintenance of the roadways to Trout Valley for maintenance from that standpoint. The subject property, as you can see on this slide, the properties which are within the village of Cary, my arrow shown here, there's an existing sanitary sewer line that runs through Country Commons Road to Stonegate Road and then north to serve the properties which are in the village of Cary proper. The homeowner is looking as part of the renovations to be able to connect their home to the sewer line which runs directly in front of their home from that standpoint. It's been village policy in the past to provide services to properties that are within the village of Cary, not unincorporated properties or properties that are outside the village limits. We do allow in our rates to charge a additional fee for properties that are not in the village of Cary to connect, so that if services provided, they do pay a larger or a higher rate than what residents of the village of Cary pay. But in this case, it's a request to provide that service connection. We do have two instances where the village does provide services that I'm aware of to properties that are outside the village. One is a subdivision on the east end of town that we provide sanitary service to. It was through a court order that we provide that service. Second is for the Lake Julian Trout Farm property. The village approved, I believe almost 2 years ago at this point, an agreement for that property to connect to the village's sanitary sewer. Property has not made that connection yet, but it did provide the allowance for a connection for the property, which is both in the village and then unincorporated part of their property, and then had stipulations within it that if it were to redevelop or increase the intensity of the development, that property would then be annexed in the village of Cary. In this case, this project slightly differs from a standpoint that the subject property is already in another municipality, but it's directly adjacent to one of our utility services. So seeking direction from the board this evening if we'd like this to pursue the connection or allow the connection. If so, we would be able to draft a service agreement to provide that sanitary service to that property and allow that connection. Again, the homeowner is here as well, can provide some additional information on their project and why they're looking for the connection. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is the homeowner's final anticipation to annex into the village of Cary?
As right now, no. I mean, from a standpoint, they're already incorporated in the village of Cary, or sorry, village of Trout Valley.
So they'd have to disconnect.
They would have to disconnect from Trout Valley if that was, an option. We discussed with the homeowner this evening as far as what options there would be if the village didn't allow the connection, if they remained in Trout Valley. But that is one consideration that they could approach, Trout Valley for disconnection and then annexation of the village of Cary.
As the board heard here, I mean, our policy typically is that you have to be in the village of Cary to be able to connect to our utilities.
I guess who would pay for the connection? I'm sure there's a tap-on fee, but
Yeah, it would
what?
be like any other homeowner that wanted to connect to our services. The village, it would just be a permit fee for water and sewer connection, tap-on fees. Actually, there wouldn't be a water tap-on fee. They're just asking for sanitary connection. Be a permit issued through the village of Cary. We'd inspect it for the connection, and then they would
Who would
pay.
actually pay for the plumbing to get it there?
The homeowner would pay for the improvements in their home. So rather than going into a septic field,
Right.
they would have a connection that would go into so they would pay for all the improvements to go into that sanitary line. And then we would just require a meter to be installed on their well to track what the water usage would be, and that's how we would bill them for that service.
And they're only looking for, they're not looking for water service, they're just looking for sewer.
Correct, only looking for sanitary.
Have we had any other requests from people in Trout Valley to tap onto our either water or sewer?
Not that I'm aware of, no. And obviously, it's a policy discussion. In this case, the property is directly adjacent to a sewer that is existing there. We do have two homes that are in the village of Cary on the opposite side of the street that are currently serviced by that sanitary line.
Is the one that's directly across the street, was that the old daycare center?
That's kind of a little.
That's further west. It's over on the edge of the slide over in this location.
So are there any disadvantages to the village by allowing this?
Well, I'd be for one concerned about the precedent that it
Precedents,
sets.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
That would be my biggest concern. I mean, we had a pretty strict policy here. You got to be in the village of Cary to connect to our utilities.
Yeah, I mean, and I can understand if I was living there that I'd want to say, hey, versus having a septic, I'd rather connect in. But unless they were going to annex into our city, I'm not comfortable saying that we're going to provide that to someone, because if I was someone else living there, I'd go, heck, I want to do it too.
I see the benefits also and would want to do the same thing. I'd like to see Trout Valley annexed into Cary, be part of Cary.
Yeah.
That's a conversation for another day. Any other thoughts from this side?
No, I agree with you. I think it just sets a precedent, if we allow them.
It opens up the door.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where I'm at.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm worried about the precedent as well. I'm a little surprised. I'd like to hear from the homeowner how you got the idea, I guess, is.
Sure. Pardon me?
Good evening. My name is Bruce Johnson. My wife Cindy and I had purchased the property in 2014. It was one of the original homes in Trout Valley, built in 1890. We did a lot of due diligence on the front end before we bought the property. One of those, we had to do the full EPA testing because there was a printing business that was in there, and we spent a lot of money on the front end before we even bought the home. And had initial conversation with the village here regarding connection to the sewer. The home is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and very outdated. So we purchased the home in July of 2014, sorry. been almost 3 years now, have poured our life and our blood into the property. So we're trying to add a third bedroom and another half bathroom. The current septic system is probably 100 years old, and it's a leach pit system. I don't think we have square footage on the property to actually add or put a new septic system in. So we're, as I mentioned, almost 3 years into the project, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the project. And with the initial conversation with the village about connection, there didn't seem to be any pushback. And I met with John and Eric, well, it's about a year ago. I think we had looked at the permitting fees and put that into our budget and actually have the application and the escrow check ready to go, and was not aware of this even being a precedent-setting event, with the village here to connect. So now we're kind of at this point where we're pretty committed. So I understand the setting a precedent with Trout Valley, and there's probably 4 homes that run along that same pipeline. So I don't know what type of precedent it could set. If you guys are thinking the whole village of Trout Valley is going to want to annex, or not annex in, but connect with it.
Anybody from Northwood Acres, Lake Julian, it says right here, it was based upon them being annexed into the village to go ahead and to complete it. So, I mean, it could open it up to anybody, not just
Trout Valley. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Would you consider going to Trout Valley and asking to be disconnected and then annexed into the village?
We had met with the board back in April, just discussing the connection, cutting the road and going across their property, and they had no issue with that. So we even had this discussion about potentially being annexed, and I didn't know anything about it until speaking with Brian earlier this evening. So it's really first blush for me considering that.
Well, I think the consensus of the board is that this is a precedent-setting event, but if you wanted to go back to Trout Valley and ask them if you can disconnect and then annex into the village, I think that it would be more of a tolerable project for us.
I mean, if he annexes into the village, we're required to give him that
Right.
anyways.
Right.
So we'd be still looking at the connection fees and.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
You'd still be regular, yeah, but you would pay our regular rates. You wouldn't pay 1.5 times the rate. So you would be, since you'd be in the village of Cary, you would be entitled to our services.
Well, even based on not seeing that fee schedule where a non-resident could be 1.5 times the rate, gave me indication that it was allowable. So now I'm hearing the opposite.
No.
And I wasn't aware of this even being a matter to bring to the board until 2 weeks ago when John Finch called us. So.
Certainly understand your situation, and I just, for the village board, I would not recommend that we make a special exception for this.
I'm in agreement.
Yeah.
Any other? No.
Yeah. I don't know if you're concerned about fees to the village of Cary versus Trout Valley. I mean, if that's where your thoughts are at, but I can't imagine that it's that much different
Right.
for the benefit you're going to get out of it.
I don't know if we'd be exempt from their fee, though.
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure. I'm not aware of what the dynamics of that would look
Right.
like if we would be exempt from their HOA fee. Is that what you're referring to?
Right, I think if you annexed out.
I don't think you would.
No,
I think
'cause
the
there's-
homeowners
yeah.
up on the top over here still pay that.
They still pay HOA?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'd be, I don't know what would be exempt from the village of Trout Valley. I mean, it's,
Say that again, Jeff. So there are some people in Trout Valley who are in the village of Cary.
The
who
homes
still
up here
pay
on the
the
top of the
Right.
hill,
Trout Valley HOA fees.
they're in
Right.
Cary, the village limits of Cary, but they still pay the HOA fee to the
Right.
Trout Valley Association to utilize the marina and the swimming pool and
And the
that,
pool and stuff like that.
and
Right.
road upkeep and that, yeah.
All the roads that are in Trout Valley are privately owned. They're not owned by the village.
Yeah, we don't
So
plow them,
everything
don't
in the
anything.
slide that's north of the dash line is in the village of Cary, but they're in the Trout Valley subdivision, so they pay association due for the maintenance of roads and other improvements in there. Also, properties are along Briargate Road, to drive next door to the village, from Main Street. Properties on your right are in the Trout Valley subdivision as well. They would also pay for association.
Just like any subdivision that has an
Right.
association fee, you're still going to
Correct.
pay the association fee. Got it.
Correct.
And the difference in this case for where annexed into the village would pay the normal rate that a regular resident would pay for water and sewer, would be the extra charge on top of it. And for the, reference back to the trout farm property, the agreement allowed for the portion of the property that's not in the village right now. There's half the property is incorporated in the area, half is unincorporated. That if they were to tap into the sewer, they could service both the unincorporated and incorporated portion of the property. And only if they were to develop further beyond existing conditions, so they added some other development in the future that would increase the number of fixtures, then that would require annexation. The village board approved a agreement to allow them to connect without annexation to those specific things.
Because half their property is on there and half of it isn't.
Right.
Yeah, and the portion of it isn't built, but it was a way to require future annexation of the development.
I don't know, maybe he needs more time
Yeah, I
to
think-
look at the options here before
Well-
we continue.
Okay,
No.
I do. I mean,
Yeah.
understanding some of the new options that we may have here. And first time I've been to a board meeting here, so I'm
Yeah.
getting familiar with the process. So I believe I walked in on the conversation we were talking about, you guys have an over capacity for your sewer system already? Does that mean you have additional capacity available, or you guys are over the limit?
We have additional.
No, we have capabilities to add
So-
more.
so-
But it's more of, it's a technicality and it's precedent. If we were to do it for you, because there's people that we've turned down before that have said that they want because they want our water and our sewer, and we can't do that.
This comes down to taxes.
I guess the question becomes why. and
People want the services, but they don't want to pay a higher tax rate on their property for the additional services the village provides.
Was
That's
it
what
an
it comes
additional revenue source for you guys long-term? I mean, to have additional,
I don't know.
connected to it?
I don't know if it's germane to the conversation though, as far as, there's the option that was discussed about potentially going back to Trout Valley, which I think you might want to evaluate and see if you can disconnect and, then annex into the village of Cary. So we're trying to provide options for you to consider here.
all right.
Let us know. Be in contact with Brian. He'll steer you in the right direction. If you have a conversation with Bob Baker, he's their village president.
Right. Okay. Do I need to come before the board again before it's any?
You would have to come back through the process again.
If there was annexation, yeah. But the board has, I think, been pretty clear as far as the connection here, that the board isn't interested in offering up a connection here for this one-time event.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Brian, are you up again? Economic incentives policy.
Thank you, Mayor. As one of our previous board meetings, it was requested by the board to bring back for discussion just our incentive policies and programs that we do offer for the village of Cary for various economic incentives. What you have before you this evening is a few documents that we do have related to the policy that was adopted by the village board in 2013 that spoke towards the types of incentives or programs that may be offered. Also in your packet is a copy of the Revolving Loan Fund recapture strategy, which was discussed before the village board late last year, and regarding the reinvigoration of that program. So real briefly, the incentive policy just establishes that policy of the board reviewing incentives requests for businesses, ways that the village may participate if desired in commercial projects to assist with economic growth in the community. The programs and incentives that are highlighted within the document, you look at on a case-by-case basis, what the village may be willing to participate and just spell out the types of programs that there may be available for different types of projects. Types of programs that are identified were sales tax sharing programs, looking at the village's local sales tax that we do collect that gets distributed back to the village through the state. providing the opportunity or discussions for flexibility for sharing that local sales tax with a potential development or operator. The village does have one existing sales tax sharing agreement, which was, I believe, adopted almost 10 years ago regarding the Selkie property. The village has not paid out any monies for that as the project has not redeveloped and generated any additional sales tax from that perspective. The TIF districts, we do have 2 TIF districts that are within the village that do generate additional funds that could be utilized for assisting development projects. TIFs offer a lot of flexibility as far as how villages can participate in development. It can be utilized for property acquisition, assisting with development costs for public infrastructure improvements within the district. The 2 districts that we do have, one is located on the east end of town along from the river towards the ComEd power lines, includes the Selkie property, the CVS shopping center, and then various Jack Channel property, and then a lot of the parcels where Burger King was recently constructed and the parcels immediately adjacent to that. That TIF, I believe, has about 4 years left on its life cycle. And has a significant fund balance in it currently for various improvements, but it's incentives that could be utilized for, if the Selkie property were to develop, could be utilized to improve, provide improvements in there as far as utilities to serve that property or adjacent properties as well. The second TIF district that the village has located in the downtown core area, it's actually north of the train station. It's a block that's generally bounded by Burton Avenue, Frankie, Main Street, and First Street. There's been limited development since the project or the TIF was originally approved in the mid-2000s. It has a very minute fund balance at this point of, I think, around $40,000 that's in there. But as development were to occur in the district and the assessed value of that area were to increase, that would generate additional revenue for that fund for various improvements. Other types of incentives that are listed in the policy are fee reductions. We just had the discussion earlier this evening regarding the Westlake subdivision and their request for fee reductions. That is one way that the community can work with development, either in residential or commercial aspect, to look at ways to reduce the upfront costs for a development to occur. That's pretty straightforward. It just looks at our existing fee structure and ways that we can reduce the fees for a project. Grants are one option that we have utilized in the Village of Cary through the facade improvement program. The village has given out various grants for local assistance in assisting redevelopment or reinvestment in properties within the village. We've given out, I believe, about 6 grants in the last 3 years for that. It's a matching grant up to $10,000. So for any improvements that are less than $20,000, it would be less than a $10,000 grant that would be given out. Additionally, most recently, the village revitalized the Revolving Loan Fund program that we do have within the village. The Revolving Loan Fund was through a grant through the state of Illinois that the village received in, I believe it was the late 80s, that was utilized for investment in properties within the village for job growth. Recently, the village previous board adopted or approved a recapture strategy related to that program. Has given out 2 loans for various businesses for the 750 Cucina Rustica restaurant downtown, and then recently the Kojak's restaurant for their relocation and expansion. During the review of that program, the village adopted the recapture strategy for it, and then working through the state requirements, the state received a determination that we are no longer required to report to them or adhere to the state requirements for those funds, and that they were releasing the funds for the village to use as we saw fit. So while we still have the revolving fund recapture strategy in place, if the village wanted to utilize those funds for other endeavors, we could do so and not be tied to state reporting for those funds. Staff researched a couple of our neighbors as far as what type of programs they offer. This slide provides an overview of some of the incentive programs that are offered by other communities, very similar to ones that the village does provide here. As 4 of them do provide facade grants. Some of those are funded specifically through their TIF districts. So those are only limited to properties that are within their TIF that they would provide assistance for facade improvements. There's fee reductions, revolving loan funds, and then also sales tax sharing equipment or sales tax abatement. Again, each community, it's what their ability is to provide fee reductions or sales tax sharing, as each community does have different thresholds that they establish for each program. That's slightly different from the programs that we offer, but more than happy to answer any additional questions you may have regarding our programs, or if regarding the policy that we do have in place, and if there's any changes or proposals to modify them moving forward.
And I think that previous discussion that we've had here with the village board is that there's been some interest to maybe modify the revolving loan fund and then also our grant program that we have here. We can focus on those too. We can also talk in totality here with everything that Brian reviewed.
I like the idea with the, for the grant program to move forward with the sales tax generating businesses. That makes more sense. But I mean, these are things, I mean, is the board acceptable to offering more things? Because there's a lot of municipalities that don't offer a broad range. As you can see by some of these, there's a couple things that they offer. And is this something that you want to, arm our staff with? And do you have a palette for sales tax sharing, the revolving loan fund grants, fee reduction? We just talked about the Westlake subdivision. That would be a fee reduction. Is that something that we want to offer people that say that it can be done? So I think having parameters set up is a good opportunity for us moving forward, so we can all be on the same page and give staff some great marching orders to give potential developers or businesses that want to come into town. So any feedback or any kind of questions that you have would be great.
Do any cities with the sales tax sharing, do they do it over a period of time, whereas maybe they would limit it to just the first 3 years?
Yeah, generally there's a shot clock on them, if you will, from a standpoint of, give Crystal Lake an example, there's specifically set a 10-year time limit. Other municipalities that I've worked for that have done sales tax sharing or revenue type of sharing have had other improvements that once they reach a certain dollar amount, the agreement would end, or a time period as well. So whichever comes first. So if it's, say it's a $2 million 20-year agreement, if they produce the $2 million in 5 years, then the agreement's paid in full at that point.
I think too, I mean, with sales tax sharing agreement, they're more for large scale developments, for kind of your whales. I mean, you wouldn't want to enter into a sales tax sharing agreement for like a car parts store that there's one down the street, for example. So this would be a special use.
Yeah, and most of the ones that I've seen in the example of Crystal Lake, it does have certain thresholds that they would need to meet in order to be eligible for it. So your small retailer or restaurant or something like that might not be eligible. The ones that I've been involved with in my career are for larger, shopping mall, redevelopments or large big box type stores that have a very significant sales tax footprint that they produce. And then those communities also have other flexibility, where the Village of Cary, we have the 1% that we do generate from a sales tax perspective. Other communities do have home rule taxes, so they have more flexibility in being able to reduce the amount that they then collect and can share that back without impacting the other revenues that they receive.
So with all these programs, in your experience, which ones tend to be the most enticing to businesses as far as coming into a town?
It's a really kind of a case by case basis, and that's what our policy, is kind of drafted as, is to review as, one comes in, what might work for your small restaurant that wants to operate in a downtown location won't work for a big box retailer that wants to, construct along Route 31. So if you have flexibility and, as we do in our agreement or our policy, similar to other policies that other villages have, review them on a case-by-case basis and see what you're willing to stomach at the time when that project comes in. If you get a major car dealership or something that moves in on the Route 31 corridor that's going to produce a lot more sales tax for the village, we're not seeing that revenue now. There's a way that you can, be flexible in that to help and, make other public improvements as part of the project and, return some of that money back. We have the TIF districts, they're very focused in where they can be utilized, but, there's for more of your meat and potato, I would say, of improvements. It's more the small guy, the grants are very large as far as how that helps business from a bottom line standpoint.
I think our overall ED policy, our incentive policy it's in pretty good shape. I mean, it allows village staff to be fairly nimble as far as if we get, say if a big box comes in, then, Brian and I have the ability to talk to him and, bring back something to the village board. I think what, we were hearing previously was just that when we had some of those facade grants was maybe we should look at doing those differently. And again, does the board want to focus on doing the facade grant a little bit differently, in combination with the revolving loan fund?
Yeah, that's what we talked about. I was in favor of that. I still like that as opposed to just handing out the money.
Making it all like a loan, a low interest loan instead
Yeah,
of.
and also, I think we should have the component of a sales tax generating business. I mean, I would like to see that's not how it was set up before, but I would like to see moving forward that it was set up that somehow we're going to be able to recoup that. Yes, we're going to get the loan back, but we're also going to get in the form of it's a sales tax generating business.
And it's programs I've worked with in the past, that's been caveats of them is you have to produce some form of sales tax. You can establish thresholds as far as how much, what the rate may be to generate it, or if it's just any sort of sales tax, there's different ways you could look at it and then focus the areas that you would approve for grants. So if it's, we want to focus specifically on the downtown, you can set up the parameters of what that area would be, or if it's for all commercial districts or commercial properties, you can spell that out as well so that there's clear guidelines within it as far as who would be eligible for it up front.
But if we convert it into the revolving loan fund, then it's no longer a grant. We shouldn't be calling it a grant because a grant means you're granting money and you're not going to pay it back. So we have to rename it. But I think the other thing that we talked about, the concern was making sure that we at least have something on our website. So if someone's perusing and they're going through it, they just know, hey, there's certain incentives available. You have to, talk about it, whether it's an existing business or a new business, that they know what we have out there. But to keep it as broad brushed as possible so that, as you said, you guys can be nimble and kind of work with each of the potential new companies, new developers that want to come here and have that flexibility where we don't box ourselves in either.
How would this help us marketing some of the vacant property that we have, like the rest of Caper or Sulky, and, letting the developers know or the realtors know that, we're ready to have some developments come here within a retail and, tag, say that we will enter into a sales tax agreement on a Caper property that's going to be commercial retail, or on the Sulky. Will that help with people, and so they know exactly what we're offering, so that each individual property that we have available will be identified as what it qualifies for, what we're looking for? Or is that?
I wouldn't get, just from my practice, I wouldn't get that site specific. I mean, if we're willing to have some concessions or participation in a project to have the flexibility for that, I wouldn't specifically say, for property A, we're going to agree to a sales tax sharing agreement. I would say, have the developer, if you had somebody interested in the site, work with them from a standpoint that we're willing to have incentives that are offered for development of it, and then find out what it is that what participation from the village needs to be in order for a project to actually happen. In some cases, the developer won't need any assistance from the village. They can just develop it without assistance. It's more of but for this dollar amount, my project won't take off. So and that's where sales tax sharing agreements, if you have the cap as far as how much, you give back to them, what the shot clock is for the time period is on it. That's a way that the village is protected if the project doesn't perform as or say it would when they first developed it. You're not on the hook for the full, $2 million or whatever that amount is that you get to that time period, it ends, and then you move forward.
I'm not saying I'm for this or against it, but for the TIF 1 that we have, it's expiring in 3 years. Didn't we have that one, wasn't that one guy asking about if we're going to extend that? What's the process in doing that, and because you only do a few more years after that, right?
Correct. You have the ability, and I'd have to review exactly the legalities of doing it, but you do have the ability to extend it an additional 13-year term, up to a 13-year term. From that standpoint, it would require approval, I believe, from I forget the term for the board of the
Joint review.
Thank you, yes. So they would be involved, which is basically the other taxing districts that are associated with it. But yeah, with the existing TIF number 1, we're getting to the end of its life cycle. It's 23-year life cycle for it. So when it does expire, whatever money is in that fund would be dispersed back to the taxing districts that we didn't utilize.
I think certainly too, it's a future discussion item here of, we have 2 TIF districts. One, they both really haven't been that active. What should we do with those? Should we look at closing them out? Should we look at expanding them? That is a future discussion item. I want to add too here as well, since we're talking the revolving loan fund. Those dollars were released to the village of Cary, and we have the ability to use those dollars, as we see fit. The board, from what I'm hearing, is kind of interested in using those dollars as a low-interest loan and sales tax associated. We do have the option, certainly, when we went through the 5-year CIP, our capital projects fund here is limited, and, the board does have the option, to move, just sweep the dollars over. They would be gone, and we wouldn't have them then for grants here, but you do have a use for them at some point here in your capital projects fund. And so I just want to make sure that the village board is aware of that it is important to offer grant programs, but we also have, financial requirements here that we're still trying to meet within our capital projects fund.
I'm just wondering, what's our goal here with this discussion tonight? Is it to have clear, discernible parameters for all these, or what are we trying to get at? Because I'm confused.
Well,
We're talking about a lot of things.
I think that the goal for me here was to get some more direction as far as the facade grant program went and the revolving loan fund, which again, I'm hearing from some folks that are interested in that low interest loan, and that there would be a sales tax sharing component as a part of the loan. So that helps to give us a little bit of direction for how we craft things. The incentive policy overall, I think, again, from my perspective, I think it's in pretty good shape where it allows us to be nimble, and it says, hey, developer, we're open to these things. If you bring the right business to us, the village board is going to consider those. So
as far as the sales tax sharing goes, I am not in favor of that unless it is some type of whale like Jake mentioned. I don't know if we'll ever get that here. I hope we do. But aside from that, I think that's totally unrealistic, seeing as our sales tax revenue is woefully short here. And that's the one thing we need to make up the difference so our property taxes don't rise. The revolving loan fund, I'm confused with this as well, because like Jake said, this money was released to us. So we keep playing this game of we have the money for loans, and we were going to use it for capital improvements. Well, now we got it for loans. Now we're going to use it for. Can we make a decision on it?
Well, that's what this conversation is about. I think that we have a couple new board members on here to let them know what some of the incentives are out there that other municipalities use, just to get a more broad range interpretation of what we want to do. We do have a sound program. We do have some wiggle room within there, but I think it's a good understanding to know exactly what the board will tolerate. I agree with Jim that, for a whale or a car dealer or somebody on a sales tax agreement makes total sense, but for a little small store, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There's other opportunities. I think the revolving loan fund is a great opportunity for us. I mean, we just started really utilizing it in the last 3 or 4 years. And if we keep on that, because it's always going to come back to us, and then we reallocate it for the next project. So I think getting people on board and to understand what we have available to us will help us make better decisions moving forward. For when we have somebody come in and standing where Brian is and saying, this is what we want to do.
So as the board, do you want to use the revolving loan fund dollars as a low-interest loan program?
Yes.
Sales tax component?
I don't know if it needs to be a sales tax
Like
component.
the sales tax
No
part of
loans.
it.
Just anybody? Any viable business?
No, I think
I mean,
it's,
like
We're not
the
a bank.
but I'm not in favor of the sales tax sharing.
Sharing,
Yeah.
okay.
No, I'm saying that for the grant, there would have to be a sales tax generated.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, two separate issues.
Right, that's how I'm hearing it as
grant
well.
one?
For a
But it's
low
really not a
interest-
grant, it's a low-interest loan.
Yeah, so grants really, yeah,
No, but the low-interest loan we give to is generating sales tax
Correct.
revenue.
correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Is that not?
That makes sense.
not
Yes,
fair?
that's what I heard. I like.
I like that too.
And that's,
But
the
I
loans
hope
we've
we're
given
not
us
going
to
to
date
give,
have been for restaurants that would produce the sales tax from that.
Right.
I hope we're not going to grant loans when we have a $500,000 deficit. I really, I don't know what we're thinking here. If we're thinking about giving loans out when we have a huge deficit in front of us, that's my point. We're not a bank. There are small business loans out there, and we shouldn't be competing against the banks. We're a government body.
Well, I think, I get it, but I think on the other hand, we're competing against other communities that are offering these things. And if you can get somebody to come in that will bring more traffic and create more jobs and create more revenue, that's going to help us bridge the gap.
What are the life of the loans like with some of the ones we've recently given out? When do they?
7 years.
7 years is max.
Okay.
I just would like to see us keep things in the toolbox, so to speak, so that if something does come up in an opportunity, we do have the resources available. I'm not saying we go out and just nilly-willy just say, hey, who wants a loan? I'm not talking about that, but I'm just saying if an opportunity arises that we feel is going to be a great fit for our community, that we have that available. If we close it out, then we don't have it available. It's money that was allocated that, in my opinion, if we keep it there as an economic development incentive, we've got it earmarked there.
And I'm fine with that, Ellen. It's fine, as long as we look at it as a budget item, and we all agree in the yearly budget as to how much is going to be in the revolving loan fund program. Because outside that, we haven't had that yet, and we've just been sort of winging it with it. And so it needs to be defined.
Sure.
To that point, the revolving loan fund does have an account balance of around $300,000 in it currently. That's after the loan goes out to Kojak. So we do have that. That's in the budget for review. The more loans we go out, that dollar amount goes down, obviously what's left in the fund, but we would receive that back through revenue from the loans. From what I'm understanding, or just from the discussion tonight, is the preference would be for not to have a grant program, as I'm understanding it, but to do a low loan program for facade improvements and things like that. So that would be financed or funded through the revolving loan fund program, and may have a cap still of 10 grand, matching from that perspective on it.
The only question I have on that, and it might be a dumb question, so just, you can give me a dumb answer if you want, but don't we have to be kind of careful if we're going to do something with the facade to make sure that it's somewhere, and what I mean is it's not meant as negative, but someone at Jewel, or if Bella's came in or something like that, and they came for that, and that strip mall is owned by another company, we don't have ownership in that. Do we want to give out money on something that we don't have anything in, if that makes sense? Am I making sense? Do you know what I'm getting at?
I think so, because we've had issues in the past where we've given out a facade grant and then they've closed within the year.
Yeah. And I just don't want us to get into a situation where, yes, that's part of it, but it's also a matter of if the Jewel Shopping Center is owned by a separate entity, should we be giving out facade money on a property that the village really has no control over?
Are you speaking more towards like a tenant within the center or?
Well,
'Cause from
let's
a-
just take it, let's just say Breaking Bread came up to us and said, hey, I want to do a facade improvement. Are we going to grant it to them when they're renting from somebody else? Who are we giving it to?
It would be to whoever would be performing the improvements. I mean, the grants that we've given out to date have been to properties that are not owned by the village, or they're individual property
Okay.
owners, or, some of the tenants that,
Okay.
or grants that we've given out have been to tenants that don't own the building that they're in.
Okay.
So they're
I guess I
doing
just want to make sure that we're covered. If we don't have any ownership over a strip mall,
Right, it's,
what
yeah,
can and can't be
I
done?
think what you're saying is that the owner would come forward and say,
yeah.
Right.
I'm requesting.
I think that would
That's
be
what I'm
great
getting
if
Yeah.
the guy that owns Jewel or one of those things that says, I want to apply for a facade and, it's looking dated. I mean,
Yeah.
we can help out and drive more
Right.
business there and freshen it up.
Or by the
I'm all for
dollar,
that.
the dollar center. whatever.
And generally improvements, if a tenant moves into a center, they're required as part of their lease requirements, or they'll do the leasehold improvements, so
Right.
they're responsible for doing the
Just wanna make
improvements
sure.
themselves.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
Got what you wanted?
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, now we have a,
We're slab happy.
does anybody want to take a 2-minute break
Do we have
here?
a time, how long this is going to take?
I think we'll be done by midnight.
4 more hours.
Wait a minute.
How
now.
fast can you
hit
talk,
three-
Julie? Really fast.
3 hours.
It will be less than 1 hour. I guarantee.
4 hours.
Guaranteed. I
You gonna
promised someone about this.
You gonna
so.
stay or-
We're holding you to it. Start the clocks, everybody. Start your clocks.
Does anybody have to use the restroom? We'll take a 2-minute break.
Sure.
Okay.
I need to stretch up my hip for the fanny fatigue.
I kind of felt like a lot of the, not everything, but like the department head updates in here were,
You keep one and we keep one.
so there was like a whole.
You're typing away over here?
Still awake? I will definitely listen to the tape.
Yeah, well, no, you will, yeah.
It's a start.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a little bit daunting at first. You'll get into a groove.
Determining how much detail is really.
Well, exactly, we like to get, the board typically likes to get the highlights. On some instances, they may ask us to go back and elaborate a little more before we approve them. And then I'll come back to you and say, could you elaborate a little bit more on this? And at that time, you can ask them, what do you want elaborated on? So, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to start talking.
There's a washroom down here or upstairs?
Okay, thanks.
This is your life now.
I have a contract that continue work tomorrow, so I'll need this
Yeah.
or tomorrow morning, actually. So this is the resolution.
And we have an executive session again.
Contract amendment, just change the date
Yeah.
of the term for Muller.
You'll typically sign things after I sign, so you'll know it's okay to
course, yep.
sign.
And these can be later, I can do it the night of. Different circumstance.
Something you want me to switch to right now? No, just keep it.
Oh, so congratulations.
Congratulations. Just well. They realized how how much I needed to stand up.
It's training, it doesn't.
Village Board, we just wanted to give a quick update here as far as, orientation. This is kind of to inform, educate, and allow you to ask any questions that you have for the various departments. So I'm going to try to, breeze through this as quickly as we can. Here's the overview of the agenda. Again, talk about our various departments, the budget, and then major projects. The org chart that's before you, we are going to review, and we'll start with the legal here, and Attorney Tappendorf is going to discuss that, and then we'll kind of snake our way through the various departments here. And so I'm going to turn it over to Julie, and she can kind of give a quick overview as far as the legal.
Sure, and this is something that would usually be much, much longer, but I will jump through. Feel free to ask questions if you have any as I go through the slides. Oh, I was going to say, I don't know how to do this. Okay, so starting with division of responsibilities and roles, and I always like to start out with that, which gives you a flavor for the branches, the three branches of local government, kind of like our federal government, except it's executive, legislative, and administrative. The important things to remember, each branch of government has different roles and responsibilities within the village. The executive branch being the mayor, overseeing the commissions, boards, and committees, running and controlling meetings, the things that you see, may vote in 3 situations, has the authority over appointment and removal of appointed officers. The legislative branch, which consists of the trustees, are the policymakers. So formulating policies through your vote. And I always say, if you want to get something done, if you're a legislator, if you're a trustee, you need 3 friends. So it takes 4, for the most part, to approve an ordinance, to approve a change in policy, the bigger substantive issues in the village, and your authority is through the vote. So it's important to have that support when you want to make a change, when you want to formulate a policy. And then the administrative branch being the administrator, and the important piece of the administrative branch is you make the policy, you funnel it down to the administrator, and the administrator implements it. So we look at it and we say, look at it like an hourglass. You have the executive and legislative branch, kind of this top layer, funneling the policies down to the administrative branch, which is the middle, and the administrator then sort of formulate or implements everything to staff and the residents and all of that. So I think that's kind of the best way to look at the roles and responsibilities. I'm going to jump right to Open Meetings Act. I would say of all the laws that you have to comply with, and there's ethics and FOIA and all of those sorts of things, Open Meetings Act is really critical because this is a criminal penalty statute. In fact, I was just talking this morning and I said there's no FOIA jail. So if you break the law on FOIA, nobody's going to jail. But there could be an OMA jail. It is criminal penalties if you violate the statute, and that's individual. I haven't seen anyone go to jail for this, but I always try to remind people it's really important to make sure that your communications, because OMA applies to you, so the board do comply with the Open Meetings Act. So all of your public bodies, so this board, your ZPA, other commissions, and committees and bodies have to comply. Your meetings have to comply. The definition of meeting is the most important piece of the Open Meetings Act. It is and the terms are important, gathering of a majority of a quorum of a public body for the purpose of discussing public business. And gathering doesn't have to be in person. A gathering can be electronic, and it could be on social media, it could be text messaging, emailing. If a majority of a quorum, and a quorum is 4, so if 3 of you are emailing about public business, then you have triggered a meeting. And that means notice, agenda, minutes, all of that, public comment, everything. So remembering that, 2 of you, talk all you want. You can pick up the phone and talk to one-on-one, you can meet one-on-one, but if a third person joins that conversation, then any discussion of village business needs to stop. I mean, and I would say electronic communications are where people are getting in the most trouble because it's hard to remember. Couple of rules of thumb, Let's say Jake is sending out a packet or communication to all the board members, and that's perfectly fine. He's not a member of the public body. He can disseminate information to all of you. Don't reply to all. Don't forward that around to each other. I'm sure that Jake has already told you, if I'm sending something out, if you have questions, contact me individually. Same with the mayor. If the mayor sends out a communication to all of you, that one-way communication doesn't cause the problem until one of you replies to all or forwards it around to the rest of them. So, kind of good tips. Don't use the reply to all. If you're going to send communications, use BCC. That's my tip. If I sent you guys communications, I would send it to myself, BCC all of you, and then you can't reply to all. It's not possible to do that. So it's kind of a good tip to send information.
Can I ask one question
Yeah.
about the meetings or having like the majority of the quorum? Does that just pertain to current village business, things that are currently that we're
Anything,
business?
right. The language is for the purpose of discussing public business. Public would be not the school district or that, but business of the village. And it could be pending issues, it could be past issues, it could be, future issues. If you're going to discuss public business, bring it to a meeting or do it one-on-one.
I just didn't know if anything passed in years past and you're trying to educate somebody or have a conversation.
Yeah, I
So
would say
that's-
do that one-on-one.
Okay.
Yeah, I would be conservative on the Open Meetings Act. There's a lot of areas where there's a lot of gray area. There's very little gray area on the Open Meetings Act. And the Attorney General and the state's attorney, either one of them has enforcement authority. The Attorney General takes a extremely strict view of this. So, whatever kind of communications you're having or meetings that you're having, one-on-one, or bring it to the meeting, other business, new business, however you want to do that, and have the discussion here. And if you have,
I'm sorry, not to interrupt, just
No.
to clarify, it's okay if I was to call, say, Chris, and talk with something about some topic with her and then call Jeff or
be careful.
email.
Yeah, be careful of the Attorney General calls it a serial communication. If you contact one of them and then, a few hours later or the next day contact another one, you're fine. If you are trying to get around the contemporaneous gathering by picking up the phone and serially calling everyone, the Attorney General has actually found that could be considered a meeting. I think it would be hard to determine what contemporaneous means. But I would be careful about an immediate call to the next member. Wait a couple of hours. Could you have a conversation one-on-one about an issue? Sure. Just be careful that it's not seen as violating the spirit of the act. And remember, the sunshine laws, FOIA, open meetings, the whole point of that is that the business of the village is done in open. So members of the public have the right to see it. They have the right to comment on it. They know what you're talking, and not just voting. That's important. The Open Meetings Act doesn't just relate to the actions that you do, but it's also that your discussions are open, that the public gets a chance to hear. So you're not just coming to a meeting, and you have committee of the whole. You have a lot of discussion. But what the state is looking at is we don't want all the discussion to be done outside of the meeting, and then all you're doing is coming in and taking a vote. And then the public didn't get to experience that. They didn't get to participate in that.
Question. With an interview, like Jennifer had asked, could we meet more than, or like have 3 or 4 people in the interview?
Only if you scheduled it as a meeting.
Right, no.
So it would
That would
have
be
to be
open to the
scheduled as an open meeting, sure. Now, if it's an interview of an employee or an appointed officer, you can do that in closed session. So you could schedule it as a meeting and then go into closed session to conduct the interview and then come back out. But if more than 2 of you are going to really gather to do anything related to village business, it needs to be at a meeting. And interviews would be discussing public business.
And then just for clarification, if the mayor wants to send us updates, to the whole board, that's completely fine, right?
Yeah, that one way,
Yep.
that's why I always say avoid the reply to all. either Jake, who's not a member of the public body, can send information to you, or the chief, or Brian, or, you know, Eric, anyone, I can. It's when somebody replies, even if it's just replying to 2 other members and it's 3. So if the mayor sends an update, you know, just wanted to let you know about this, that's fine. Just none of you respond to that, unless you're responding just to him, you know, just the one-on-one. You know, the best is get in the habit, if you're going to send something to everybody, to either use the BCC, the blind copy, or just put language in there. If you have questions, contact me individually. Please do not reply to all. You know, sometimes I know some administrators that have that just kind of as every time I send something out, I do that, just to be safe. But that's why we do training, just kind of a reminder to be careful. You know, you just don't want to be caught in that trap of having the conversations. You know, closed session, you guys know the drill. We don't really need to get into that. You know the purposes, you know the routine of all of that. Public comment, I like to mention it because it's just been the last couple of years that the Attorney General has really cracked down on what you can do with respect to public comment, on limiting it. If you place any limits on public comment, time limits, where it's on the agenda, the Attorney General says you need to have some written policy for that. It doesn't have to be in your code, but adopt a policy that sets some parameters. And I haven't seen, at least tonight, we didn't have any public comment, so, you know, I'm not really sure if you do have any limits, but if you're thinking about imposing limits, and not at a public hearing, public hearings are different, but just your general public comment, we should talk about having some kind, I think we did do.
It was not executed.
Okay, so that's something just to consider if you're thinking of putting any limits on
What's the
that.
standard for letting residents or businesses or somebody talk? Is it 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
Yeah, well, you know, if you're going to impose one, you have to have written rules to do it, but the standard has been about 3 minutes, and the Attorney General has upheld limits of 3 minutes per person, 30 minutes total. So you could say our public comment period is 30 minutes total. So if it's 3 minutes per person, whoever signs up, once you're finished with your 30 minutes, that's perfectly acceptable. And you can choose where on the agenda you want to have it. You don't have to answer questions. The Attorney General said it's comment. That's up to you.
Right. Well, we were always advised not to interact.
Yeah, I think that most of the communities I work with take a thank you for your comments. If you have questions, you know, give your name to staff and staff will get back to you. Trying to answer an off the cuff without being able to do any research and look into it rarely bodes well. You know, you're just, it's a question that maybe you're not prepared for. You know, thanking people for their comments, listening to people, getting back to them if there's follow-up, I think is good practice.
So you're suggesting that like a 30-minute window, a total window?
That's what the Attorney General's upheld. You know, it's entirely up to you on policy. I recommend to my clients that they have a written policy for public comment. The Attorney General, if you impose any restrictions at all, the Attorney General will find a violation if you don't have a written policy. So it's good to have one. It's something to consider, you know, what that policy is within certain restrictions, because there are a lot of opinions from the Attorney General on what's allowed and what's not. You can't require somebody to pre-register 5 days in advance, which makes sense. Your agenda is not even posted until 48. I mean, there's a lot of limits, but there's also a lot of leeway on what a reasonable policy is. You know, the point is you have to provide public comment. It's good to hear from the public, but you still have, as evidence tonight, a lot of business to conduct. If your public comment is 3 hours, and I've been at meetings with that, something like that, how do you get the business done? And really, that's what you're here for.
Well, I know, but on the other hand, how do you make sure everybody has an opportunity to be heard?
Right. Well, and that's why you don't have to have a 30-minute. You could say, we let everyone speak, but we, you know,
Once,
one time. Yeah, that's legal too.
Allowed people to come back 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Is that frowned on, or?
You can limit it to once. That's been upheld by the Attorney General. You know, you can say that, or say that you can only speak once on a particular topic. So if somebody doesn't get up 3 times for the same issue, Lots of different options on what you can do on public comment. All right.
Are we thinking of writing something up for public comment?
I think that
We did previously, and the board was not interested in that at that time, so.
I think we should, moving forward.
Well, we could discuss it.
Yeah. Freedom of Information Act, there's a lot of information that staff needs to know and the FOIA officers need to know. All you really, as elected officials, need to know is that there's a presumption that the records of the village are open for inspection and copying. And that means your records too. So your communications, your emails, your text messages, if they relate to village business, somebody could FOIA them. There may be exceptions that we would withhold the records, but as a general rule, the records will be available for inspection. Certainly any emails that you send using the village account or village server, village email addresses are subject to FOIA. And then there are, and this is sort of the rule that the court Champaign versus Madigan case has set out. If it's on a village device or account, if it's public business, it's subject to FOIA. Very simple. If it's on a personal device, if you use your own phone to text, if you use your Gmail account or private account, and it's about public business, about village business, it might be, it's not automatically a public record in 3 circumstances. If you forward it to or from a village account, so let's say you got an email on your Gmail account and forwarded it to Jake, it's on the server, so it's public record. If you send it to a majority of the village board, which you should never ever do because that's a violation of the Open Meetings Act, so don't do that. But if you did, then it would be a public record. And last, if you're texting or emailing during a village board meeting, that's public record, even on your private device. So just think about that when you're using your private devices. Some communities are actually prohibiting elected officials from using private accounts. You don't have that in effect, but some are doing it because it's really difficult if a FOIA request is filed to compile those records from someone's personal device. So FOIA officer has to contact each one of you individually, send us all your emails, send us all your text messages that fit this parameter. And frankly, you don't want to have to look through thousands and thousands of records. So as much as you can kind of keep personal and professional separate, I think it makes it easier on you. If it's social, if it's non-village business related, it's never subject to FOIA. So don't worry about, if you're using private or professional accounts. But if it's village business, it could be subject to FOIA. Records retention, I just mentioned this. It kind of relates to the issue of FOIA. So our records, the village records, are open for inspection, but there's also a law that requires the village to retain those records. There's a schedule that we have to file, a destruction policy that we have to comply with. So if you have, I can't imagine that any of you would have the original record. Typically those would be with the clerk or they'll be with staff. But if you do have an original record, it does have to be retained for a certain amount of time, some records forever, minutes, ordinances, those contracts, deeds, those sorts of things. I would say if you ever have a question about that, check with staff. Is this something that I should be retaining? Do I have to worry about, but how long I retain it and that sort of thing. Ethics, some of the obvious ethical laws that apply, the Gift Ban Act, this is an easy one. You can't accept a gift from somebody, a vendor, a supplier, a consultant that is doing business with the village or wants to do business with the village. There are exceptions to that, some minimal gifts that you can accept. You can go out to dinner with, let's say, the village engineer, a consulting engineer or a developer, as long as the meal's not more than $75. That's just what's set by state statute. You can accept a gift, one gift per year from a prohibited source for $100 or less. Political contributions are exempt. So those are, campaign donations are not banned by the gift ban. all of these sorts of issues are things that if you're not sure, just raise it with staff. If Jake needs to run it by me, or if you need to contact me, is this a gift? Do I need to worry about it? What should I do? Same with conflicts of interest. If you're ever concerned, is a particular issue that I want to vote on or that's up before me, is it a conflict of interest? Something to run by the attorney or by Jake. As a general rule, conflicts of interest under state statute are financial in nature. If you are either directly or indirectly going to benefit financially from something that you have to vote on, then you cannot vote on it. That's the easy rule of thumb. Sometimes there are situations where it's not a financial situation, you're not going to financially benefit, but you may feel uncomfortable voting on something that that issue, the person, you feel that you cannot act in an unbiased and impartial manner. You are not prohibited from acting in that situation by law because it's just financial conflicts. But you certainly, if you feel that you cannot be impartial, you could abstain or recuse yourself. Again, that one is more internal. I don't feel like I can be impartial in this situation, I'm going to recuse myself, as opposed to if it is a true conflict of interest, if you're going to benefit financially, you have to recuse yourself. Land use issues, the only things I want to raise about land use, for many of you, you've seen me at meetings where we've had some slightly controversial developments come before us and before the ZPA. And some of the issues that come up in that situation are due process issues, procedural issues, following the statutory and local notice and hearing requirements. It's very set established procedures under state statute on an application has to be noticed. And Brian talks about sending notices out to the neighbors. We have code provisions that have that. Due process provided at the hearing stage, and that's at the ZPA, to the applicant and to interested parties, neighbors, objectors, that sort of thing. That's at that level. We don't have to worry about that at this level. What you have to worry about at this level when that recommendation comes is making sure that the decision that's finally made is based on the standards set out in the zoning ordinance, that the ZPA has made the recommendation based on those standards, and that your final decision is based on that standards. And we've been through that for the new guys. You're going to have something, probably within the next few months of, what are the requirements, and making sure that we follow the procedures, which, I work with Brian and Jake on that. Contracting and bidding. Prior appropriation, you have to appropriate for all sorts of expenses, and that includes contracts. Competitive bidding is required if it's a public work contract, and I use 25,000. That bill has been passed. It's not been signed yet. Right now it's 20. It will be 25. It can be waived by a 2/3 vote of the trustees, and occasionally you do have this where you'll waive competitive bidding because it's a sole source contract. If there's only one contractor or consultant that can actually provide the services, going through bidding doesn't make any sense. Why would you spend the time and the money? It's sole source, you'll waive the competitive bidding. Or if you have a situation where you need something done right away, you don't have the time to go through that, there's an ability under state statute to waive that. Prevailing wages, that's just a state requirement. We don't necessarily like them. I've had a couple of boards, a couple of trustees and aldermen and communities vote against it, but you have to do it. State law requires you to adopt the prevailing wage ordinance and then to pay prevailing wages in your contracts, that the contractors pay prevailing wages to their subs. I went as quickly as I could, and I stayed under 4 hours.
Good.
Any questions? Nope. That was really fast. If there's anything that anyone comes up with afterwards, run it through Jake, and I'll try to follow up.
Very good. Thank you, Julie. Now we're just going to start with the department here overview. Yep, we're going to breeze through it quick. Management services, so essentially our village administrator's office touched on a little bit here earlier, executing policies and goals for the village board, advising the board on policy issues, and also the implementation. Village administrator's office is also involved with the leadership here for village staff as far as implementing your policies. Human resources, risk management, IT are just some of the things that are included in that department. Finance?
Thank you, Jay. In order to provide the trustees a general understanding of the core functions of the finance department, I classified our primary responsibility into 3 essential categories. The first category is accounting and financial reporting. If you will, these are the basic bread and butter of our operations. It encompasses 4 key operations, functions including utility billing, as you heard earlier, prepared bi-monthly for over 6,200 accounts for residential and commercial accounts. The utility billing is very much a daily process for staff. It includes payment processing, residents moving in and out of town, answering questions about high bills, implementation of the new meter program, which Director Morimoto alluded to earlier this evening. Next function is accounts payable, processing all vendor invoices for payment upon board's approval of the warrant with bill list, accounts receivable, and of course payroll. Stemming from that, from a reporting standpoint, the comprehensive annual financial report, or the CAFR, is prepared each fiscal year upon the completion of the annual audit. The annual treasurer's report is also prepared annually, which summarizes all the cash receipts and cash disbursements for the fiscal year. And finally, a monthly financial report is prepared subsequent to the close of every month, which summarizes all the financial activities and discusses revenue and expenditures compared to budget. The second category, I would quantify that as finance administration and treasury management. Again, this includes prepare and coordinate the annual budget process. We also prepare the annual appropriation ordinance that is based on the adoption of the budget. Talk a little bit about management and oversight of debt service obligations, any bond issuances that are out there, or loans. We manage the investments and monitor all the cash flows. And we prepare and coordinate, of course, the annual village audit. The third final category, just general services, all encompassing, responsible for customer services and retail operations. We oversee all the village's cash receipts for utility billing, building permits, citations, accounts receivable, commuter parking permits, and licenses, etc. And finally, of course, last but not least, to ensure compliance with various village policies.
Thank you.
She's fast.
It'll be a while.
Here's the 4 hours.
There you go, that's it. So here's our organizational chart, and it basically breaks down the department into 2 sections. One is field operation, and that would be the backbone of our department, and that is the direct delivery of services to the community. We call that patrol. And you have deputy chief that's in charge of 5 sergeants, and the sergeants are responsible for a shift. So there's accountability in regards to operations on the field operations side. That's Deputy Chief Nadenoff, and he's responsible for most of the people in the department. So he has a lot of personnel issues. And then Deputy Chief Fillmore, who is more administratively and technically tasked, is responsible for support services. Deputy Chief Fillmore handles a lot of the IT things. He kind of plays a role village-wide when it comes to that regard. He's also responsible for overseeing records. We have a record supervisor and a records technician currently. We had 1 resignation and we have not filled that. And then we have investigators. We have 1 detective and 1 school resource officer. So we have 26 sworn personnel, 2 non-sworn records that are full-time, and then 1 part-time, who is the community service officer, a really good person named Ron Rossi. He handles the Metro lot enforcement and things of that nature, and does some administrative tasks like bringing our transmittals up to the county building and things of that nature. Some of the services we provide, and again, we're a very service-driven department, as you can see, in regards to some of the criminal issues that we take reports for. We tend to do a lot more service-related activities, such as assisting the Cary Fire Department, which is a number of our calls for service, responding to suspicious situations, doing vehicle lockouts, doing checks for well-being. We conduct a lot of traffic stop in the area of 2,600 to 2,800 traffic stops a year. And then some of the other things that I put in here for you, just so you can see what we do, is we travel over 100,000 miles a year, and you approved the purchase of 2 vehicles tonight. I really appreciate that, because we not only do we put miles on them, but they tend to idle a lot. So we tend to abuse vehicles when it comes to that regard. And then you'll see, and I've been remiss in the last couple of months because we had a record supervisor was out on leave, but she has completed our monthly reports. So you'll be seeing a slew of monthly reports coming towards you at your next meetings, because she's caught up with those administrative duties. We spoke about this today in regards to events and in-kind services, and here's a list of some of the things that we provide either traffic control or crowd control for. The events that have asterisks, the 3 asterisks, are events that we receive reimbursement for our personnel, and we've developed a amount that we bill those entities based on information that is provided by finance, and I believe it's like $58 and change hourly for our personnel. And it's a blanket amount that we've that finance determined based on wages and benefits and things of that nature. The school, like the Cary Grove High School, the Cary Grove football games, the graduation, they will reimburse us for our personnel when they're signed up there. Otherwise, the other things that you see here, we do not receive reimbursement for. A couple things I wanted to talk about in regards to our operation was, you'll hear CCOM. In fact, I believe that we spent a lot of money this warrant on CCOM, and we do that periodically to the tune of about $267,000 a year. But what that provides you is emergency communications. And all of our police communications go through CCOM. It was, the Village of Cary was a founding member. It was created by an intergovernmental agreement. It's a public safety answering point. So they receive 911 calls. Now, we just had some discussion recently as it relates to how those calls are routed. And as we exist right now, the 911 calls are now routed to McHenry City NEARCOM first, because the 911 calls follow the fire district, and the fire district elected to use NEARCOM for their dispatch services. But we're still a member of CCOM, and we have an auto attendant that answers our non-emergency phone number, and one of the selections is hit 1 and you go to our police dispatch. And we have a direct dial phone in our lobby, so someone can pick it up when they come into our lobby when it's not attended. Our patrol officers are out on the road, and they can call dispatch to have a police officer meet them at the police department. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was STARCOM. We spent a lot of money on STARCOM, and that is to improve our voice communications with other agencies. And it'll also, hopefully, in the way I looked at it, was it's revenue or expenditure neutral, in that we won't be maintaining our own radio network and paying for increasing telephone circuits that we're going to disable once we make that migration. And hopefully, we're going to do that by the end of June. The other thing that we have in regards to emergency communications is the Emergency Telephone System Board in McHenry County. McHenry County only has one. It's very efficient. I came from Lake County, and they had about 19. Because we only had one here, and because we met a certain population threshold, we had to reduce our PSAPs by half. So we went from 6 PSAPs to 3 PSAPs just last year, and that left CCOM, the county, and now McHenry County, McHenry City, or NEARCOM is what they're calling themselves now. So we get our money from a surcharge through the ETSB, and they provide certain things. There's a statute that relates to in regards to what they can expend money for. They don't have to spend it on everything. There are things that we don't use, like automatic vehicle location, AVL. We don't use that necessarily right now, but they do provide connectivity. They do provide and support CAD software, and they will provide our wireless connections for our mobile data terminals. We purchased 9 computers today for our field units, and we will be connected to the CAD system by air cards that the ETSB provides. I am currently a member of the ETSB board as the village's representative. And now that changed from just recently from the Illinois Commerce Commission, the ICC, and now falls under the purview of the statewide 911 administrator, who is falls under the responsibility of the Illinois State Police. Some of the mutual aid groups that we are party to are the ILEAS, which is the Illinois Law Enforcement Alarm System. We have a car plan. We call that mutual aid. We can call people, and it's a set plan that we can request that resource or other resources that they've cataloged. The other thing that we participate as a member of ILEAS is a mobile field force. That's for like civil insurrection, riots, things of that nature. We have one officer that is assigned to that. Then we have the Northern Illinois Police Alarm System, NIPAS, you'll hear that, another mutual aid system. Very similar, in fact, ILEAS modeled themselves after NIPAS because it was established based on some activities that happened in the 80s, I believe, through a couple of North Shore agencies and some flooding, and that was kind of the impetus of it. We have one member attached to the emergency services team. That would be SWAT, or in just regular vernacular, where if we had to call somebody for a barricaded subject or a high-risk warrant service or things of that nature, we can call them. They're a very experienced team, and they are very proficient. The Major Investigation Assistance Team is a group that helps with serious crime investigation. Currently, we have our 2 assigned police officers investigating the shooting that occurred in Burton's Bridge. So they're out participating in that right now in terms of trying to identify an offender. We have one member who's a sergeant of the department, is a commander, and one of our patrol officers is the lead investigator. Just recently, I became the secretary to the executive board for that group. And then we also participate in McHenry County Gang Task Force. That's primarily used for gang suppression, and you'll see a lot of call-outs during the summer for some of the summer fests. They kind of reduce their activity during the winter. Some of the mandates that I think are important for you to understand real quick are we have to maintain statistics on traffic and pedestrian stops, and we have to report them to the state. And that's available through the Illinois Department of Transportation. They look at the demographics of the county. They compare what we submit to what the demographics are, and they'll tell us if we stop individuals of minority groups at a higher rate than what they would consider in regards to demographics of the county. It's sometimes flawed on certain, situations. So, but right now, we tend to stay around the 1.0 or 0.98, which is exactly the same as the county. Our stops reflect the demographics of the county. Officer-involved deaths and investigations. Officer-involved death investigations. Just recent. This just came out based on the attention that was paid to some of the high-profile use of force incidents, and we cannot investigate our own officer-involved death or shooting. We have to ask somebody else. MEAT fulfills that requirement for us in McHenry County. One of the other things that happened about 4 years ago was we were prohibited from establishing quotas for traffic enforcement, so we can't use that as a category for performance evaluation. Something to be considered. And then finally, just recently, they established mandatory in-service training, and we have to do certain training every 3 years and certain training every year. The yearly training is usually law updates, use of force training, which involves scenario-based training, and then every 3 years, we have to do an in-service for constitutional and proper use of law enforcement authority, procedural justice, civil rights, human rights, and cultural competency. They are still working out the bugs in regards to this because they established this law and really didn't define what all those things meant. Some of our initiatives that which tends to happen a lot, if you'll ask Julie, they'll enact the law and then kind of work it out later on. And then finally, some of the initiatives that we've established over the last couple of years are we have a domestic violence advocate, we have a partnership with Turning Point. Deputy Chief Nadenoff became a mental health first aid trainer through funding from the Mental Health Board. We have a social worker now that's been funded by the Mental Health Board that we're able to use, and that'll be for at least 1 year. And she's been very busy lately. We've been kind of routing some of our calls to her. This is a big one, number 4, crisis intervention team training. It's a 40-hour training. It's not been available, but through a grant from the McHenry County McHenry County Community Foundation and the McHenry County Mental Health Board, we were able to obtain about $14,000 to provide this training in November. So it'll be available, and I believe the county is also doing one. The sheriff's office is doing a training, so we'll be able to get our personnel through this very good training in regards to dealing with people having mental health issues and intervening with methods that aren't aggressive. And then traffic crash investigations, we have a total station now so that we can map our traffic crashes in a very professional manner, which is the standard that is becoming known or required to some degree in regards to serious traffic crashes. We have our equipment now, and then of course we have TextCaster, and we've been using that to notify individuals if there's some type of incident that's occurring, so they're informed, or they can generally adjust their route so they don't get delayed by some type of traffic issue.
Thank you, Chief.
I believe that's it.
Nice job.
Thanks, Chief.
I'm ready too.
I'll be brief on community development. Just the way to summarize kind of what the community development department does is we're responsible for the regulation of the built environment in the community. We basically tell you where you can build something and how you can use it, how you need to build that structure for building codes, and then once it's built, how you maintain it. The department's very small in the community. With the Village of Cary, we have 2.5 staff. Myself as director, our building zoning official, John Fitch, is responsible for building permits. And then our part-time code inspector we met earlier this evening, Dave, he's responsible for code enforcement efforts within the village. From a planning, zoning, economic development perspective, The department oversees our long-range planning efforts. We're responsible for the administration of the comprehensive plan for the village, which is a long-term policy document as far as land use regulation within the village, development regulations or zoning requirements, which will indicate where certain uses are allowed for properties and how you can develop a property. And then from that standpoint, regulation of our zoning map. So making sure that those uses for your property comply with zoning of the property. Also, within the long-range planning efforts, we're responsible for the village's economic development efforts, work closely with the Chamber of Commerce on initiatives, attend their meetings, and also work with them on various activities within the village. Member of the International Council of Shopping Centers, which is a conglomeration of national organization that meets regularly to discuss development opportunities in the area. It's made up of brokers, municipality officials such as myself, and developers that are interested in commercial development in the area. With that, also, we'll have a lot of discussions with developers, brokers, and property owners on their properties for ways that they can improve the site or bring additional business to their location. Beyond this, we also work with McHenry County Economic Development Commission for initiatives within the county, ways that we can bring additional businesses into the county or services that they provide. And then also work with the state as needed for various programs or funding for businesses that can expand their business base if needed. Other planning efforts that the department handles is current planning, so reviewing zoning petitions that come before the village. If somebody wants to develop their property that doesn't exactly comply with code, they need to apply for a variance. We handle that process or administer that process. We respond to development inquiries for individuals that are interested in building in the community, discuss with them what the processes are that they would have to go through. And then related to that, we operate as a staff liaison to the Zoning Board of Appeals. As you can see by zoning cases over the last year, we have had a significant increase in the last couple of years as far as zoning cases that we have seen. Some of those are minor compared to others. So, you know, detached garage may have less impact than a larger residential development or manufacturing expansion like with Sage, but we do administer the process, work with both homeowners and business owners to go through the zoning process as needed and help them facilitate that process and come before the board for approval of their projects. Once they do receive zoning approval and they've comply with our regulations, we do then oversee the permitting of the building from the standpoint to make sure that they construct it to current building codes or codes that are adopted by the village. This is more of John's realm in the department, that he'll review processing of permits that come in. We'll do plan reviews, issue the permits, and then follow up and do inspections and issue certificates of occupancy once construction is completed. As you see by the chart, we've seen roughly around 1,000 permits a year the department issues. We had a spike in 2014 due to some weather conditions that came through the area. But generally 1,000 is kind of the norm that we're seeing at this point. We also have a few consultants that we retain to assist with periods of peak demand. B&F Technical does our building plumbing code plan reviews and also our plumbing inspections. They also do inspections in the field when staff that we have on hand cannot accommodate all the requests that we have. So they supplement staff from a standpoint of on a case-by-case basis if necessary. Then also we utilize Christopher Burke Engineering for our stormwater consultant engineering plan review for projects. And those costs for those review and inspections are directly billed back to various developers. Finally, code enforcement. Obviously, when you build it, we make sure that it's maintained in town. Over the last year, we had about 540 or so service requests that we responded to. Majority of those most repeated uses are the ones that are listed here: tall grass and weeds, property maintenance concerns as far as the upkeep of the structure. RV parking is one that we do respond to a lot, not specifically like motorhomes, but more recreational vehicles for storage on property. We have regulations in the village where you can store items during the winter or summer months that we do regulate. Temporary sign enforcement will remove signs that are placed in the village that don't comply with signage requirements. For those, we'll do various activities to gain compliance. We'll provide notices of violation, cut and liens. If we have properties that are not being maintained, we will actually hire a consultant, contractor to cut the property, and then we'll lien that for that expense. And then, if necessary, go through administrative adjudication for compliance. Our main concern for property maintenance is to get compliance, so we'll work, consistently with the property owner until that is achieved. Finally, the other duties as assigned that we perform, we also administer licensing within the department. So we issue various licenses for contractors on an annual basis. Obviously, this evening we saw liquor licenses and video gaming are through the Community Development Department. Will administer those and bring those before the board. Auctions as recently added, and then also we'll do scavenger waste haulers for that. Also provide services to commercial properties in the village. We'll provide licenses for those. So that's the overview of Community Development Department.
Thank you, Brian. Do we want to stop now and come back to this, or do we want to get through
I'm
public
ready to
works?
stop, yeah. If everybody else wants to keep going, you can, but I'm ready to leave. It's 4.5 hours already.
Pick it up some.
It's fine. We'll come back to this. We could start another time.
Yeah. Great job, though, guys. Sorry, Eric, I know you were excited. He was ready for a little song and dance there to bring it back around, but you know. You had a lot of time.
We have no department head reports. Just had them. Just did. Executive session, huh?
Do you want to move, you want to move that?
Yeah, we could do that. Executive session. I'd like, instead of continuing that tonight, I'd rather just have one-on-one conversations with everybody, if that's okay.
I would prefer to discuss it as a group, everything, the appointments.
Okay, then let's go to executive session.
But do we want to do the executive session as just a separate meeting? Or continue?
With me.
It's fine.
Okay, we'll move it to the next one. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.